Park City, Utah will hold its regular meeting with an anchor location for public participation at the Marsac Municipal Building, City Council Chambers, 445 Marsac Avenue, Park City, Utah, 84060 on Wednesday, June 15th, 2022. Planning Commission members may participate in person or connect electronically by Zoom or phone. Members of the public may attend in person or participate electronically. When public comment is accepted, those comments can be accepted virtually. To comment virtually, use e-comment or raise your hand on Zoom through www.parkcity.org/public meetings. Written comments submitted before or during the meeting will be entered into the public record but not be read aloud. For more information on attending virtually and to listen live, please go to www.parkcity.org. All right, so yeah, are you still having some issues with the audio? Any feedback, reverb, or anything, or is it working okay? Okay. All right, so the meeting's been called to order. We have all commissioners are present. We do have 2 commissioners attending virtually, and that would be Commissioner Hall and Commissioner Sousa, but they are here with us. So with that, I'll move right into public communications. If there's anyone from the public wishing to speak on an item that is not on the agenda, you could step up to the podium or raise your hand in Zoom. Okay.
Can you guys speak up a little bit or turn the volume up?
Yeah, are you not hearing me well? I'm not sure what's going on with the audio. I have muted and I have my volume all the way off. Let me just double check. I hear myself through the speakers, so I'm
a little bit better now. Yeah. Thank you. Closer.
When I did that, it started to, okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, you bet. And that is a good public communication. Thank you. we just communicated. Okay. With that, we'll move right into staff and board communications and disclosures. Do we have any communications from staff, Gretchen?
The only communication I have tonight is our next meeting on June 22nd. I will not be at the meeting. Our Assistant Director, Rebecca Ward, will be taking my place for that meeting.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I will make a disclosure that I will be recusing myself from item 4B due to just working with that applicant on the project.
And Commissioner Vanda, I will be abstaining from item 4C as I was not present for the last meeting.
As for item 4C, I do have a disclosure.
And Commissioner Kenworthy of Mark Harrington, Senior City Attorney. I think you can make that at the time the hearing starts because that's a little more formal for the appeal. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from anyone? All right. Then we will just keep moving right on ahead and get into the regular agenda. So our first item up tonight is 4A, 2346 Park Avenue conditional use permit. This is for the Peaks Hotel.
Thank you. So my name is Planner Holly, and I've got 2 coming back to you this evening. So we're going to get started with the Peaks Hotel conditional use permit at 2346 Park Avenue. So this is, just as a reminder, it's a proposal for 2 items. We've got the request for a temporary structure, also known as a tent, to be located in the rear courtyard. And the second is a proposal for a parking reduction. This is for the temporary structure, but also for Visante on the lawn, which is a pending administrative conditional use permit, which will not be considered if this parking reduction is not approved. So updates from the last meeting. First, regarding the tent proposal has been amended to attempt a mitigation of impacts, especially to the nearest neighbors. So the newest proposal includes 12 tent assemblies with an approved fire permit for a maximum of 5 days each, with a 1-year review of this application to ensure impacts are being mitigated properly. So that's down to 60 days from the total proposed 180 previously. And it's really just an attempt to achieve a balance between the neighborhood, to allow the hotel to utilize their property to support their goals while also allowing the neighbors plenty of time where the tent does not take place, so enjoyment of their own property can be enjoyed as well. So next I'm going to move on to the second proposal, which is the parking reduction. This sounded weird. But so this includes Versante on the lawn, and then I can wrap it up together at the end. So at the last meeting, the commission discussed a parking study completed using existing data from the winter parking study and then statistical data to gain a perspective on the summer parking space occupancy. So with all the uses on the Peaks property, the LMC would require 176.2 parking spaces. The study completed by the applicant indicated that approximately 114 parking spaces would be needed to satisfy the parking demand with the overlapping uses at the Peaks. Again, this is statistical data requested by the commission previously, and the applicant has agreed to complete a summer parking study to assert real numbers for the city. In addition to this, the Peaks has done a few things. They've purchased ads on the city bus to provide 20% discount to those who ride their bike, take the bus, or walk to Versante. They've provided 2 bike racks for guests riding their bikes, painted the curb red along Jupiter View Drive with accompanying no parking signs. They've provided directional signage leading cars to the underground parking lot. They've gained a towing contract, done KPCW ads informing about active transportation. They've agreed to do the parking study, like I said, and then they've also done a large outreach campaign informing guests that come to Versante on the lawn to come without a car. To wrap this up, I just wanted to remind you that both of these items are required to have a year review to ensure compliance, also ensuring impacts are being mitigated. And at that time, if those are still concerns, the applicant can be further conditioned or even have their approval revoked. So the action letter is heavily conditioned to allow the department to decrease the intensity of the site at Peaks if impacts are still too great. Specifically speaking of the proposed parking reduction, staff finds that the proposal is in line with the general plan, and if impacts can be appropriately mitigated, the long-term vision of the general plan can be better realized. And on this side, I have the alternatives for your consideration. But with that, I also have Stephanie Samuels here with us this evening, representing the Peaks Hotel, and I will let her speak briefly on this project. Thanks.
Can I ask you just one quick question?
Mm-hmm.
The 1 year, that's after 1 year?
Yeah, and I mean, I would say within the year, because like we would probably just after the summer, we're not going to wait till right before they're going to start again. We're going to do it after the summer.
And then biannual review, or did you say annual? I'm sorry.
So actually, in the report, we are going to, and in the conditions of approval, for 3 years, we will do a review, an annual review.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Samuels. On behalf of the entire team at Versante, thank you for taking the time to hear our request. Versante on the Lawn was created out of the need for normalcy during the chaos of the pandemic. After 2 seasons of operating the lawn, it became clear we fell into something our community needed and look forward to each summer. A place for family and friends to gather outdoors, dine with views, let kids run freely, dance to live music, and bring their fur babies. All the elements needed for the genuine mountain town experience we love in the summer. Any given evening, you can find bikes lined up, a football tossed around, action-packed cornhole, and lots of good conversation and laughter. I learned a lot after attending the last planning meeting until 11 p.m. First, the Planning Commission has one of the hardest jobs ever. And second, the focus on change in Park City is here. Every public comment heard was about the changes of our small town we all love. A longtime resident spoke last week, and it stuck with me. His ability to adapt and ride the bus 25 times last winter after being a resident for 40 plus years. As much as we want to blame tourism and congestion, our local growth is part of the problem. Traffic is no longer a peak season issue as we see backups in May and October. As a local, I took a few years off from attending Silly Market because of parking issues. But when I returned this year, I made the commitment to biking, and I actually enjoyed the past two Sundays. I no longer do my grocery shopping at Smith's on a Saturday because there is no parking. Parking everywhere is challenging. We're here today to request that you relax the mathematic equation that states we do not have enough stalls for Versante on the Lawn. as we must change our behaviors and locals and be a part of the solution. Versante is committed to getting the word out about alternative transportation methods. We've made efforts to deter driving to our location by adding mass bike racks, no more parking on Jupiter Drive. We actually started that. I've got more signs coming from our tow company to finish the rest of Jupiter Drive. This will alleviate congestion. We opened up parking in the hotel's garage for overflow, offer discounts to guests that ride their bikes to the lawn, and show their commitment to making things work for everyone involved. Our locals start to lose what they love in our little big town and the little perks that set us apart. Then we lose the authenticity of our town. As you open up for public comment tonight, our mission was to rally our community to commit to biking, busing, and being part of the solution. We will continue to drive this message on all branding and social during the summer season and even often offer discounts. Our other promise is to our nearby residents. We will make every effort to mitigate traffic and hindrance on their property as we share the private road behind the hotel. Last week, you heard Mrs. McGivney. She's our closest neighbor and waited until 11 p.m. to call with her public comment on our behalf. While some may speak up on Jupiter View condominiums, they do not speak for everyone. We do have wonderful relationships with our neighbors. Peaks Hotel in Versante has always put our town, our community, and our nonprofits first. We want to be nothing more than continue to be a good neighbor for Park City and the Jupiter View condos. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Okay, and that's everything as far as presentation? Okay. Let's see. I just had one question, and as I've been thinking about this, and the tent specifically, is there anything preventing them from building a permanent roof structure out there, as far as the building codes and everything goes, or is that something that might be contemplated down the road?
I'll say that there's nothing they could apply for a building permit for sure.
Okay.
No, we actually had building plans in place before COVID, and then everything kind of took a backseat to that. But we are actually planning something in a pavilion, a permanent structure to move forward. So this really ideally is just for this summer.
Okay, thank you. That helps a lot. And then regarding the lights, help me. I did drive by at night one time, and the lights were really. I think would be safe to say they probably don't meet our lighting codes, and the amount of light that was emitting out of that courtyard area with all the string lights and probably the type of bulbs. There wasn't down lighting, different things like that. And so I could see that being an impact. And I'm just curious if there's anything that we can do either to address it now or to condition it. Just another one of the things that I would like to look at. And I don't need an answer this second, but I just wanted to kind of get those out. And then I'll turn to the other commissioners for any further comments. I have more comments a little bit later, but I don't think I need any answers on them. And I'd like to see what the other commissioners have to say on the application.
So I think for me, thanks for your presentation. I respect everything you guys do. And personally, we go to Versante on the lawn all the time. I also thank you guys for making effort to find ways to help mitigate the problem. And looking at the parking study, it was interesting to see how much different similar towns are in their parking requirements. And I know we're pretty strict in Park City. And I don't think that precludes us again from letting you guys continue to function and getting some more information this summer. So I do like the fact that they have to come back in August, or even September, October might be better, because that's really September, October is really local time here. I feel like late August, September, October is really when the locals are, you're going to see more of that impact. And I would love to see what that really shows in that, because in the summertime, we're going to have everybody, but when people start to leave town a little bit more, it'll be interesting to see kind of what that shows through those months. Would be great. Along with John's, when looking at the notice of action, that was number 17, no signs, exterior lighting proposed with this project. I just didn't know if that only pertained to the tent. And I noticed the nighttime pictures too, that it's quite a bit of light that comes from there. So I agree with Chair Phillips and looking at that. And if that also applies to the lights around like the Versante and the lawn area, or it's just this, I think it's just the parking for that. So I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So I guess the point of the finding was that they're supposed to be in the tent. But there is a condition of approval, number 8, that says there's no lights on past 11 o'clock. And that was kind of just the thought process was their event ends at 10, they clean up and they're done by 11 kind of thing.
And they're just strung outside lighting string lights. So if we need to limit those, that's very easy to do.
I can also say for Versante and the Lawn, even though it's not this project, that it has the same, but actually I think they have a lower cutoff. I think it's 10 p.m. Because their activities will end at 8:30 for Versante and the Lawn. And also for that one, the string lights around the fence will have to come down after their outdoor dining is completed.
My other questions were conditions of approval number 11. Does that go for both the Versante and lawn area as well as the tent structure for noise?
So this is just for the tent.
Okay.
And the ACUP that is actually having that public hearing tomorrow at 12. But it has the same,
Okay.
It actually does have the same COA in there.
Okay. My other questions, I think that was mostly it. I really appreciate all the public comments. I know people are worried that we're not looking at the fact that whether we like Versante on the lawn or not. That's not the question. It's just making sure that we're keeping neighbors happy and following the rules with parking and making sure we're doing a good job. So I really appreciate all the public comment we got. And that's about all I have right now.
I have a couple of questions, and for the applicant and staff, if I may. Can we just look at the chart that was included in the staff report? There are no page numbers. It's the location and off-street parking as outlined in the LMC chart.
Let me pull it up just a moment.
Okay, great, thanks.
Laura, were you talking about the one that has all the uses together?
Together?
This one, right? Oh, I got to share my screen. Sorry.
Yes, please.
No.
Above it, it says location. It says A, location off-street parking is outlined in the LMC 15.3 for the proposed outdoor uses.
Okay, here we go.
Okay. My first question is, what is the capacity of the tent? 800 square feet. An 800 square foot tent?
If you know,
The tent is just a shaded area. There's no walls or sides to the tent in the summertime. With the 800 square feet, we can we do no more than 6 rounds of 8 people underneath the tent, but we utilize the courtyard as a whole as far as, so like last week we had a meeting group out there and there were 80 people utilizing the whole yard. The tent only partially is set up for shade and to cover food areas.
Well, how do you come up with 4 parking spaces required for an 800 square foot tent if you don't know how many people the tent
The
occupies?
groups that we have that utilize the tent are guests of the hotel. So that's what the group was that was out there last week. They were hotel guests, and it was a meeting that took place, and they had luncheons and events outside. So they're actually hotel guests. So the crossover in the parking there is already accounted for in the hotel room.
Yeah, I understand that
I can speak to the LMC if you want. So
Okay.
the how we got 4 is because it's considered additional leasable commercial space. And so for commercial space, you've got One, for a hotel minor or major, you've got one space per room or suite and one space per 200 square feet of separately leasable commercial space. So that's how we would analyze it.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. And then down below, it says restaurant outdoor dining based on site-specific review at the time of the CUP, but there's no number associated with that. Should that include, I'm just trying to understand why that wasn't sort of filled in and tallied.
Right, because in the LMC and the parking regulations portion, the restaurant, an outdoor dining doesn't have a number. So it just says based on a site-specific review at the time of CUP. So it kind of does leave it up to the planning commission to review it. And in this case,
maybe 46. So add 46 sort of, because that's what the calculation that's down below. Study includes 46, just using that number that the study came up with, 46. Or is that not the way to think about this? Could you just explain that? See the 46 that's in the Versante on the lawn occupancy, children, hotel guests. So you come up with 46 additional.
Oh, okay. So this part, let me see, where exactly is the 46? Oh, the 46, yes, yeah. Okay. So at the previous commission meeting, when not last week, but the one before when we spoke about this, we asked for an additional study to use statistical data to try and make an assumption of what the parking requirement would be for Versante on the lawn. And so this is the applicant's study that they provided with statistical data. And that's why they're having to do another one in the summer as well.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that helps. Thanks for clarifying that. I also wanted to ask the applicant, at the last time we discussed this, there was a discussion about the underutilized parking garage on the premises. And I don't see anything in sort of the revisions to the application that speak to that sort of try to better utilize that parking garage as part of their proposal. So
Parking garage doors are closed and accessed opening with hotel keys only. So Versante guests that are coming to utilize the lawn don't get into the parking garage. So what we've done was we've kept the parking garage open through 10 p.m. at night. That way anybody can park underneath there. And we've had A-frame signs put up back towards directing traffic out of our parking lot and into the garage.
What about a requirement that your hotel guests must park in the garage? Is that not something that's been entertained?
We actually updated the 3 contracts that we use for hotel guests, including the hotel guest registration sheet, letting them know that they need their parking permit and to park underneath the garage. We added verbiage on those it's not contracted on their registration card when they come in.
That requires them to park in the garage?
I don't believe it doesn't say required, but it says no Jupiter Drive parking and to utilize the garage. I don't believe it says that they're required to, as long as they have a permit. And that we have tags that they put in their car.
Mm-hmm. I just think that would have been a helpful mitigation measure that would have been pretty easily employed that I didn't see in the proposal. And my other thought was perhaps it makes sense not to allow the tent to be up, even if it only generates a few more cars, but maybe it makes sense not to allow the tent when Versante is operating, just to help mitigate some of the impact of any additional people coming to the site. So I was kind of going down that road, and I also was disappointed to see that there was no again, utilization of the garage. So everyone loves Versante. Everyone wants to keep it open, but I don't know if the applicants really met their burden yet justifying this parking reduction. So I'm curious to hear what the other commissioners and the public comment is on this. Thanks.
I can go next. This is Commissioner Hall. I do find that the TDM does have this, makes this UP, sorry, my connection isn't great. I do find that the TDM is compliant with our CUP, and I'm honestly impressed with the active transportation plan, and I wish more applicants would do this. So I'm in full support of this new transportation plan with the reduced parking. I feel like it's exactly what we've been asking applicants to do for a very long time. So I'm very appreciative of that.
Is that it? Yeah, I have a question for the applicant. Last summer, did you receive any formal complaints? And if so, how many?
No formal complaints last year that I know of. I think the year prior we had one just with volume of music while the team was cleaning up at around 9:30. So we've addressed that with the staff, but that was the year prior. I do know that we ran into a lot of people park on Jupiter Drive, and that was an issue. Not a formal complaint, but I had spoken to a neighbor when I was out and that walking the back street. And that's why we want to make the effort to make sure that the curb is red. And there was some confusion on it's a private drive and we own half of the road. So that's why the effort has been made to paint the curb red, to get the tow contracts and get the signage up.
Okay. So for you, I want to go into the conditional COA 10, which is I guess your annual review. I have some observational data on a project that's close by that I want to share.
Great.
And so we're going through the Staines Canyon parking issue. And since that's been instituted, I'm watching all the employees from Hotel Park City and the golf course. They're parking on the north side of Snow Creek Shopping Center, as well into neighboring private roads. So I want to make sure, and again, this is something that we need to keep track of from a review standpoint, staff level, but if we start seeing people park maybe at the fire station next to the park and using those spots up so that the community can't use those, how will we manage that review on our annual reviews? Is it really just based on trusting the public to file formal complaints?
I mean, that's a really good question because, a lot of it would be off of complaints like me asking around, people coming to me, that kind of thing, or going to code enforcement or police or something, or to Stephanie as well. I'm not sure actually what I would say off the top of my head in terms of managing, something like that where it's it happens in other situations. So
essentially we just have to trust the public to make those formal complaints, should they?
Could we do a review through the commission and then it's publicly noticed and just similar to what we're dealing with now, and then we could open a public hearing. We can actually hear from people in the
so to
neighborhood.
actually get a little more public outreach. Yeah.
Instead of just doing it at staff level, not that we don't trust you, but that changes the process a little bit.
And the noticing.
If everything's going great, it should be pretty straightforward, right? And if there are concerns from the neighborhood, unanticipated things, that we can't even anticipate, such as what Commissioner Johnson is saying, then at that time we could again just further the mitigation possibly. So I don't know if that's something that we could look at doing, because I was looking at, could we do a sunset? I am also, concerned, although I do like the mitigation strategies. I like what's been done. And I do think that, I think that it is very in fitting with the general plan. It's pushing people into different transportation, which is ultimately the goal we're all trying to do across the city. And so I encourage that, but then the concerns are the things that we're not aware of, and this is different. And so, which is why we're putting so much time in the review of this, is because we are concerned. And so I don't know if that's, and then maybe after 1 year, then just do the process that you've already outlined, just to kind of follow through. Just a suggestion.
I think it's a great suggestion. I think that adding the noticing requirement in there too could help us at least like put more word out there, and then it could help us gain some insight that maybe that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So do you want to do maybe
formal complaints? We know that there's more complaints than the formal complaints always, right? They'll either go straight to someone, or before they go and they actually file a formal complaint. People just aren't, typically going to just do those on a whim. And so that would help us capture more of the concerns and things. I don't know. I would be very supportive of that. I think that would definitely help me feel much more comfortable approving this. So,
and then I just have a couple more.
Yeah, go for it.
I lost my train of thought. So just so I understand the numbers correctly, with the tent and Versante on the lawn, it's a 35.2 parking reduction that they're asking for.
I'm
basing it off of 141. They have 141 existing parking spots on site as well as on the street.
So, we took away the street parking just because it seemed to be getting out of hand and possibly causing safety issues. So we took those away. So what they have existing, I have counted as 129. And so they would be, with all the uses overlapping, they would require 176.2. And I know I wrote it in here somewhere.
I can do the math too.
Okay. It's like 40 something.
And then so if we take the tent out of the equation and allow Versante on the lawn, what's the difference?
So let me share my screen again here. Okay, so to start with our parking code, the way it is 1536, our regulations for the hotel and the restaurant, just those two things, we would require 164 spaces. So they're already technically underparked.
Right.
Now, I mean, they were approved this way, so our code has probably changed since they were built in 85. And so that's kind of like already, like, we would have had to ask for a parking reduction either way if they want to add anything. So that's one. So then you add the tent, you add 4 spaces then, because you're adding 800 square feet of additional leasable commercial space. And then for the outdoor dining, it's 2 spaces, like excuse me. I got lost. So for the tent, you'd have 4 additional spaces, and then for everything total, it would be 176.2.
Okay.
Yes.
I got the numbers right. Okay. I guess I feel that there's 2 different uses being proposed. I do think that Versante on the lawn does align with the general plan, sense of community goals. So I would be in favor of allowing that. I am not in favor of the tent right now, but if the commission feels that the tent, I do not think it does align with the general plan, but if the other commissioners do, I would just propose to change COA number 8 to 10 p.m. so that it aligns with the other uses on the property. Those are my comments.
Sure. I just have a quick question. When does Versante on the lawn go till? What date?
Labor Day weekend. So we're aligning with our liquor permits so we can get for the lawn that limit it. We're closing it on Monday using 2 special events permits a week. So that allows us to operate through Labor Day weekend, the first weekend of September.
So that would be the one thing. McKenna, I just want to make sure that any traffic studies go all the way through till their very last day.
That's why we chose August.
We were proposing the peak month like we did for winter.
Mhm.
Is that, okay.
So I agree with the peak months. I see the historical data as July being your busiest month.
July's occupancy aligns with February, and that's why we chose that month. Again, just August being that we just chose August to propose based on our engineer that comes in and does the parking study.
So I can't, in good faith, reduce the parking without verified mitigation. So I'd really rely on the data that's going to be provided from this summer's occupancy over there in parking. I agree with Chair Phillips that a public notice would be great, but I'd always encourage the neighbors and the applicant and everybody to get around the table. This parking issue is the number one issue. It drives people crazy. It's not easy being a planning commissioner when these things come up. I can assure you we lose friends. So try and work it out with your neighbors. And I think we're going to hear from some neighbors today that both love you and are not so fond of what's going on. So I saw both that there was going to be a takeaway on Jupiter, and I think you just said that you're going to share the private road.
We do actually share the private road. We own 50%, they own 50% of the road. So parking is an issue and everybody parking up Jupiter. So what we've done is we've painted the curb red. We've enlisted Park City Towing a contract with them. I've got some signage out that no parking sign, but then in working with ACE and the new sign requirements for a tow contract, I've had new signs being made that will continue all the way up the road. So really just to enforce, to put that really out there front and center that there is none. Our building maintenance department's aware and will be walking the grounds. And ultimately, I feel like I'm also a responsible driver too. And if I park somewhere that there's a red curb and no signage, I'm getting towed, right? So we'll be making it happen.
What about your restaurant occupancy?
The restaurant actually shifts when the Versante on the Lawn is open. We see half as many people inside because they're all out on the lawn.
So with that shift, you're going to limit the occupancy in the restaurant by what percentage?
I'd say honestly, some days it's even 50%.
Yeah. And with the out of balance, so to speak, parking reduction that you're already approved with, an additional parking reduction, because the lawn gets a lot of people. I'm a big fan, and my wife and I have been there often. So full
the first
disclosure.
2 years that we ran under, there was that COVID forgiveness. It was very easy. We put 100 occupants out on the lawn is what our administrative CUP went for. But this year we've committed to downsizing that, 6 heads per picnic tables. We took away the cocktail tables, and it is going to be 72 people.
And what are you thinking about if we wanted to lower, if the parking wasn't going as planned and people weren't using the buses and stuff? What do you think about lowering the occupancy inside?
We're flexible. We've even toyed around with our ski shuttles I live out in Park City Heights, and it breaks my heart to see the Richardson's black parking lots empty. We've even talked about using our ski shuttles for this time of year to allow this. Maybe we shuttle our employees in and shifting gears to make this happen. Versante on the Lawn, really, like I said, the way that it started and the way that it's ended up, it's been a huge part of who we are and what we enjoy about our mountain town too. So whatever it takes to make this happen, that we have to be flexible on. Again, doing our parking study this summer, partnering with our neighbors and make feedback, really just so we can all coexist and make this happen. And if we find that people aren't committing and the traffic and the overflow is an issue, then we're flexible. Absolutely. Then we scale back on the number of occupancy that we can have out there.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. So we have 30 minutes scheduled. I'm trying to pay much more attention to that. I'm going to, with those comments, and I think as Commissioner Kenworthy had said, well, we'd like to hear from the neighbors. So I'll open up the public hearing for anyone wishing to speak on the item. If you're not familiar with our meetings, we kind of allot 3 to 5 minutes for comments. If you can just try to keep it to that. If you could state your name for the record, and then there's a sign-in sheet up there as well.
Derek Howard, I'm the Secretary and Treasurer of the Parkview HOA. We are directly across from the Peaks. We spoke at the last meeting. Let's split it down again, tent and parking. Tent is really simple. What we said last time still applies. This was put up during COVID. This massive tent has no place sitting in a residential community. We should just pack it up, take it away. That would be really simple. If we had to have the tent there, if you really want them to have a tent, the 5 by 12, Planner McKenna spoke to us, we could bite our lips and take it for a year. But what we would ask is no more, not just a straight 5 days. Take it for, you have a wedding for a couple of days. Tent goes up, put the frame up, tent, 2 days, bring it down. Otherwise, I could foresee it sitting up there for 60 days. We're just going to have this aluminum frame, white tent sitting up there. So if we can dump it, perfect. If we can't, we will sign on to a compromise for 5 by 12. But the 5 should be a maximum. And what we would like is the event, have the tent, take it down the next day, put it up the day before. And that includes the frame. Just now we have this aluminum frame up there, strung up with lights. There's some drapes, it looks not bad, but it's a tent frame. Chair Phillips, I actually wrote to Planner McKenna today and suggested what you mentioned about you should just build a shade terrace. It would look nice. And for us looking at it, we by far prefer it. So that's our thoughts on the tent. If you can pack it up, dump it, perfect. If you really want them to have a tent, we'd like it. The 12 times, we'll agree on. You know, it was a compromise. We said, yeah, we can live with this. But the 5 days has to be restricted to the event only. Now, on this event area, this was not there when the condos were put up. It was brought in about 5 years ago. Before, it was a nondescript patch of grass sloping down. Peaks did a great job. They regraded it and they've made it nice. When there's an event up there, it is noisy when there's music out there. It bounces off the walls. We had one a couple of weeks ago, I think probably an end of term. One, there was a whole bunch of kids in there, DJ, neon lights blasting on. I won't play it for you, it's noisy. And one of our owners was, I have my 2 grandkids in the front bedroom. I can't get them to bed. Now, we live in Park City. We don't call the police. What they do is they send emails to the board. What are you going to do about this? The noise, the 50 decibel, we understand that's the limit. Our solution was we bought the guy a decibel meter. If it goes over, you can call the police and we'll sort it off like that. We understand the Peaks have a business to run. This is a community, a residential community. We were here before the event area was built. Now, let's move on to parking. Versanti on the lawn is great. Everyone loves it. The owners in Parkview love the place. There's not a problem with that. It's all about the parking, the disruption. Now, I sent you in the pictures from the last couple of years. You've seen it for yourself. The parking on Jupiter View Drive got out of control. The Peaks were either unable or unwilling to control it. And I did read the parking study. What it did not show was anything for the last 2 years, the usage of the parking. Why was Jupiter View Drive overflowing? Why were the cars poaching parking places in the condos? Why were they driving through, getting upset and argumentative with us when we tossed them out? We towed one a couple of weeks ago. It is an issue. This is a vast reduction in parking they're asking for. This is not 10. This is what, 40 odd? It's a lot. And looking at the last 2 years, They couldn't control the parking there. Was the underground parking completely empty? Was everybody parking out in the street? We don't know. It's not in the report. If it was, that would be another question. Why? To rely on the general public and saying, oh yeah, bike here, walk here, it's really nice. And I know we all get on our bikes and do that sort of thing, but a lot of people don't. They get in the car. Hey, where are you meeting? Over at Versante. Okay, 2 or 3 cars go in. We all get there. Well, we don't, we walk, but that's a different matter. I do not trust the ability of the peaks to control this. What's going to happen when people drive up? There's no parking places. They're going to circulate. They're going to circulate through Parkview. They're going to try and poach their spots? Probably. They're going to get upset? Yeah. A week ago, I have a dog. His name is Ben. He loves to play catch with me. And this guy couldn't get in and spun really fast and came up to us and so I decided to annoy him for 30 odd seconds and just show him how good Ben was at catching the ball. This is what we have to deal with. Then I told him it was a private road and he told me what I could go do with myself. That is the level of aggression we get. Another one, we had a big truck. And it's like, well, where am I going to park this? That's not my problem. And he was a big guy in a big truck. This is what's happening. We are driving traffic into a residential area. You cannot just say, well, we can't control the traffic. You brought it there. You have to deal with it. That is the responsibility. So if we allow the reduction in parking, where's it going to go? How is it going to overspill? How are the people going to react? Now, one thing I'm going to bring up from meeting a week ago, I'm talking about the ski area parking. Someone from one of the HOAs up there mentioned, once the ski area got the police out, paid for the police and the private parking attendants, you had people standing at signs. People would look up, ooh, policeman was there. Well, if you do active mitigation, you might get somewhere. That means people out there. A sign is nothing. People ignore signs. They don't even look, probably don't even notice half them. There was no active mitigation in this plan whatsoever. What I didn't see was what's going to happen when the whole area is full. How are they going to tell the people what's going to go on? I'm sorry, you can't get in for your dinner. Hey, we have no parking places. How's that going to work? So, Commissioner McKenna, thank you for listening to us. You know our position from it. We love Versante on the lawn. We unfortunately do not love the parking disruption of a neighborhood community. We all know. Thank you very much.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else coming up to the dais and no hands on Zoom, so I'll close the public hearing and just turn back to the commissioners for further discussions.
Chair Phillips, I have a question and maybe a suggestion to for Planner Hawley. Is there a way to sort of combine the a reduced occupancy in the restaurant while Versante on the lawn is ongoing, and possibly an elimination of the tent? Can we get the numbers down so that a parking reduction isn't needed, but Versante and lawn would still be able to operate? Has that been explored at all? Do you understand what my point is here?
That makes sense. And I guess I think a condition of approval, like we would have to run by the applicant. But I guess one thing I would say is, yeah, Stephanie, we could ask about what you think in terms of like reducing that capacity inside the restaurant, and then also possibly taking the Parkview HOA treasurer's suggestion of just only for the event instead of the 5-day max.
Yes, absolutely. I think that we could totally, just based on what we've done and we've seen in the past, reducing inside seating capacity is completely doable, and we can commit to a plan of action like that. As far as the tent, part of our business model in the summer, we are a wedding based hotel, not ceremonies, but we are the family choice hotel for a lot of the big offsite weddings. So the tent is, I should say, part of the selling process for some of the events that we host on Friday nights for the rehearsal dinners. So as we could limit the tent being up for certain times and go through and pick some of the events off in the summer that are really imperative that we have it for coverage, even if it's just like the major peak summer months where the sun comes over the building that we need that shade for, we can definitely reduce. Now, there is also, like I said, I can pretty much speak for certain, this is the last summer that the tent will be in use, because the pergola, especially after going through this whole process, a more formal structure that matches the building will be coming up in front of the building for a permit soon.
Do you have a suggestion for interior restaurant capacity reduction by chance?
I have to see based on seat requirement, but I think that we could easily commit to about 20 to 30%. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Kenworthy, you have any thoughts on that? I know you were.
What is your occupancy, total occupancy
Seats in Versante is 96.
inside?
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about a reduction of 25 seats.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to just try to
I would think that the applicant might want to increase that reduction in occupancy inside, given what she just represented with the huge shift to the lawn during the summer months. I'm trying to help the applicant get there without a big parking reduction, because I don't think we can really justify it because the mitigating the impacts of Versante and the lawn and the tent and full occupancy of the restaurant doesn't seem, having a towing contract to me is not the right approach. I would suggest that the applicant try to reduce that indoor capacity more than 25 seats.
This is Commissioner Van Dyne. So I somewhat disagree. I think that we are putting in ways for them to go about this process this summer to really get good data, and putting in a process that if this isn't working, to review it. We're setting up a way for people to have a say at the end of summer, to have all of this. And I think, I don't know, I think the applicant has done at least some work to help mitigate, and now has should have the opportunity to try and go forward as it is. I think that it's like starting with a 25% reduction. For me, that's enough. And then giving them the chance to give us the data because this isn't forever. We're going to get a review process pretty quickly.
I would agree with that. I'm kind of in that same position, especially if you can agree to coming back to the commission after this year. You've been doing it a couple of years, so unfortunately we don't have all the data, and I'm not sure how accurate that would be with COVID. With COVID, everything was different. I feel it's there's a lot of mitigations, and what brings me comfort is knowing that we will have another chance to review this, and that also gives you the opportunity to work with the neighbors and their concerns and to prove to them, because ultimately our job is to help mitigate and not create issues for the neighbors. As much as it may be popular for everyone else, the direct neighbors are our largest concern. So I would agree with that. At this time, I'm kind of in that same place. And so I'd like to see if the other commissioners can just give us a kind of a poll where they're at to try to move this along.
I agree with Commissioner Van Dyne, and I am comforted by the fact that condition 11 and 16 also allow for the director to modify to further mitigate in the meantime and the review in 1 year.
And
So
I would-
essentially, this is a couple months of a
Yeah,
CUP.
and I wouldn't even say, I would say not 1 year, but let's do this after the season so that we're not scrambling to try to save your next summer. Right? If that makes sense. So we could say December or whatever, if you can, but.
Agreed, definitely. Fall.
And with the 25% reduction too, I just wanted to also state that too, if you're willing to start with that, but that also means track those numbers for us so we can see where your numbers are hitting, and that'll help us with our.
After COVID, we're good at limiting our dining room. We know how to do it and do it properly. So we can get there, definitely.
Where are you at, Commissioner Johnson? And if you're not sure, that's fine.
I'm still debating. I mean, I think I'm not, I just, I have concerns. I'm glad that we're going to have this review process at the end of the year. But as I've been observing, I have concerns with giving them all of it. So I just don't think the tent is justifiable on my part. But I guess if we do it and if we proceed again, I think we should reduce the hours. Like 11 o'clock's too late for those exterior lights, and it goes against, kind of everything I've read in the general plan as well as far as impact on neighboring properties. So
I would add to that, if you don't mind. I don't mean to interrupt.
Sure.
But I agree with the time, but also adding a condition saying that it will abide by our lighting ordinances that we've recently passed too, by the way.
I think that's actually where the 11 o'clock came from. But I'm pretty sure that's where I got the 11, but we could
Yeah,
reduce it
and
to 10.
whatever else is in the lighting, all I can say is that you have an image in this packet. If you look at it, it's a nighttime image, you can see the light emitting off of your own building. And that in itself, and I've also seen it in person. And so whatever we need to do to take every other bulb out, whatever you need to do. But I would say I would feel comfortable if it met our lighting codes.
And that, Senior City Attorney Mark Hennigan, that's existing condition of approval number 8 already requires that.
So as long as it does, and we can verify that after the year.
So when will this expire?
Well, I would say we make it expire at the end of the year,
September
January
30th?
1. I mean, it makes no difference because they're not going to be operating past a certain date.
Are you just talking about the tent? Are you talking about the tent?
Oh,
yeah.
The applicant,
Well, it doesn't have a limit on it. This is like they do the CUP so that they don't have to keep coming back. But they've got the year review that we could change conditions. They also said that they're going to be building a structure, whether that's not a condition though. So you should not really take that. But you could also limit it or more so.
Yeah.
Kind of like we said, like bring it back each year to or for the next 3 years to mitigate and see if it works, see if it doesn't work.
So I guess condition approval 15 kind of addresses it, right? So if they can't mitigate at the end of the season, then we can revoke the cup.
Exactly.
Correct. Number 15 and number 17 address revocation expressly.
so I would just like to speak to the applicant and let them know that they have a very unique situation for Park City with that lawn, and you're the first one coming in, and it really is enjoyable. And there are portions of the general plan that allow us some flexibility to do that. But I don't want you to misunderstand that the general plan we have an obligation to protect residences, especially with everything that's happening here. So there's a balance to it. And Derek doesn't seem to be so unreasonable to me. So I would hope that you two, with all these conditions, and I agree with Commissioner Hall, and I agree with the other commissioners that this will be a good test period. And I really look forward to seeing you back with the actual data. And I'm certainly hoping that if, you end up in the first week or month with 5, 6, 7 toes, that you're adjusting and you're working with the neighbors. That's what I'm going to look to see.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add my final comments here. So I would go along with the approval if we could add a condition of the 25% reduction in the restaurant. I would like to see a condition that the hotel guests are required to park in the underground garage or in the garage. I don't know if it's underground. And then I would put in a condition that no tent should be in place while Versante is operating without a special permit. So I think those are very reasonable conditions given the obvious parking problem there. I don't think we need another season to observe the problems there. And I don't think enough mitigation efforts have been put in place here. I don't really see any substantive mitigation efforts. Painting the curb and a towing contract and putting the parking requirements in the hotel contract don't seem to me as appropriate. And I think the applicant could have done more to justify the parking reduction. So those would be the conditions that I would like to see to move this forward. I don't really like the idea I don't like the idea at all of granting the parking reduction and then reviewing it at the end of the season. We know what the conditions are over there. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
So I have a question requiring hotel guests to park in the underground garage is great, but you can't accommodate all the guests there necessarily. There's not enough parking spots. So I just don't see how you can require everybody to, but then not actually have enough spots for everybody to do that. I see a discrepancy in forcing them to do that when you're at least opening up the garage and allow everyone to park everywhere. And I just don't know how you enforce that with guests when there's not enough actual spaces to accommodate all of them to force them to park underneath there.
Well, so the parking number in the garage is 50 something, I recall, and the hotel has stated that only about half of their guests bring cars to park their cars at the hotel. So I think we're pretty close, actually. I don't think the general public that's going to Versante is going to feel comfortable pulling into the parking garage unless there's clear signage, and I haven't seen an example of that yet, with a big, sign that says, hey, you can park in here, because most people would think that would be limited to the hotel guests. That's just so that's why I think getting all the hotel guest cars off of the surface lot would be very helpful. I think it's just an obvious kind of mitigation measure, but so that's what I would suggest. That's just my idea. Thanks.
Okay. Anything in addition to what we've talked about, commissioners? If not, I'd like to try to push this to a vote.
Yeah, I'm prepared to vote. I have no further questions.
Okay. Well, so I think we have agreement. I guess what's important to understand is what we have an agreement on as far as the conditions of approval. I guess whoever has suggested them, I know that 25% is one.
I can go through them if you want.
Yes, if you can, and then that way we're clear on what we're voting on.
So the first one that I have is update COA number 8, lights off at 10 outside. Good? Okay. COA number 22, would be a 1-year review with noticing of property owners within 300 feet to be reviewed by the planning commission by December 2022.
We could say within a year, and they know that
I
they're
mean,
going
we
to
should
want
do it like, it wouldn't
No, I
make sense
agree
to wait a year.
I agree with the calendar.
Okay. Calendar year.
Count
This-
within.
Yeah, it should be
December.
before December,
By this-
before the first of the year.
Okay. December 2020, okay. Okay, 23, the parking study must be completed during the month of July. Good, okay. While Versante and the Lawn is ongoing, a 25% reduction of the interior of the Versante restaurant shall be enforced. Yeah, okay. 25, tent may only be erected for the days of the event. And then 26, the suggestion for hotel guests shall park within the parking garage. I do want to just bring up, looking at the numbers really quick, there are 127 hotel rooms in Versante and there are 58 interior parking spots. So I don't
think that should be a condition of approval. I think
And
they
that's all I
should make an effort to encourage their guests because that's their easiest population to get into the garage. So I think in your wording for your contracts, encouraging them to park in the garage, that's just going to make your parking mitigation easier if you do it on that end. That's your easiest group to get to. So I think they should take that upon themselves. I don't think it should be a condition of approval because it just doesn't make sense to have more rooms than spaces you have.
And where do the other commissioners sit on that? Commissioner Johnson, you're kind of in the middle, I think. So,
Yeah, I think I'm okay with not having that. You've stated that you've ordered sign because you just have the one sign up right now. You have signs that are going to promote people to make that right turn into both parking lots.
Yes, correct. But like she had, Commissioner Van Dyne had said, our easiest client to control and enforce to park underneath the garage is that. And when every guest comes in, they have to sign a registration card and they are issued a parking pass to put in their car window. So again, adding that verbiage will be super easy and to get that going. Again, that is our biggest issue is when a hotel guest doesn't have a parking space. So it's in our best interest, true, for customer service to make sure and ensure that they do. So guiding them to the garage is the right way to go.
What's the height limit on your garage? Sorry.
Oh God.
Sorry, did you hear me sigh?
It's 9'6".
I'm so sorry. I was like,
9'6", I believe. You can fit a smaller SUV with a ski rack on top or a trolley box on top. I know that.
Okay. Commissioner, we got a couple commissioners. I'd like to turn to Commissioner Hall. Where are you on that? The last item we're speaking about.
I really don't have a strong preference because I feel that the applicant will maintain it. So I would defer to the rest of the commissioners.
Okay. And I think Commissioner Sousa, we're aware of your position. And then Commissioner Kenworthy, are you in agreement with Sousa or the other commissioners?
I'm good with the majority of the.
Okay. All right. So is that capture all of the amendments?
That's what I had.
Okay. So if there's a commissioner that would like to make a motion on this item.
Sure. Chair Phillips, I move that we approve the conditional use permit for 2346 Park Avenue Peaks Hotel, administrative conditional use permit, temporary structure and reduced parking, based on the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and conditions of approval as amended.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Van Dyne and a second by Commissioner Hall. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion passes. We had, just for the record, Commissioner Sousa was a dissenting vote. Okay, and with that, we will, congratulations, you guys. Hope it works out well for everyone, including the neighbors. So,
Absolutely. Thank you.
okay, I am going to step out for the next item. Commissioner Susser will chair.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Bransford parcels, the zoning map amendment.
Yep, and this is Planner Holly again. I'm just going to, oh, here's my screen. And actually, yeah, you can sit here if you'd like, because then you'll use my computer afterwards. Okay, so we are revisiting, sorry. We are visiting another application, and this is the zone change for the Bransford parcels in the Upper Flagstaff area. So actually, let me share. I just want to quickly remind you where we are here. Let me just.
So I'm looking at the staff report, and it's my understanding that this item is going to be continued. We're going to open up a public hearing, but then it's going to be continued to August 10th. Is that correct?
That is correct. Wanted to bring it as an action item because we kind of wanted to make sure we're getting everybody involved, getting the information out, getting the application out. And so, but from staff's recommendation, we're not prepared to make a recommendation at this time, so that's why we continued it already. Okay. Here. Okay. Well, so to reorient you a little bit, this is a reminder that the Bransfords have two parcels. So they've got 39.62 acres in the Upper Flagstaff Mountain area. These parcels were annexed into Park City with the Flagstaff annexation, but they did not sign on to the Flagstaff Development Agreement. The parcels are located in the Recreation Open Space, or ROS, and the applicants are proposing to rezone to estate to allow development of 2 single-family homes. The site contains significant vegetation and some steep slopes exist. There are biking, hiking trails, and the Deer Valley ski easement. The parcels are also located in the sensitive lands overlay, which would require an analysis to propose any kind of development. Another refresher is that these parcels currently do not have access or utilities to the property. So since the last meeting, the applicant has returned with conceptual plans, including private road options or utilities, locations, and also proposed locations of single-family homes, which were presented in your packet, and the applicant may speak on briefly after this. So a summary of this information a little bit is they are not proposing to develop on slopes over 30%. They're also assuming to not develop on slopes over 15%, which would leave approximately 88.99% of the acreage preserved. Assuming also a max of 3 acres per parcel and possibly 1 additional acre of disturbance for a road, this would leave approximately 82% of the land preserved. And keep in mind that the applicant would most likely not be developing their 3-acre lot for one single family home. Again, the applicant has noted that they would agree to put a conservation easement on the acreage outside of their development areas, as well as keep or reroute the existing hiking, biking trails on the property. Staff also addressed some inquiries from the last meeting, including precedents and considerations for the possibility of development in this area. And regarding this precedent, after getting into the weeds myself, looking for specific properties that may have similar situations, I just realized that either way, this zone change will set a precedent because anyone can request a zone change. And at that time, staff, the Planning Commission, City Council, we'll have to review the analysis and how the zone change complies with the general plan or not. So if a future applicant has a similar reasoning for this application, it could happen. Finally, this is not meant to be read. It's in the staff report, but staff or I also recognize that without many details, it's difficult to make recommendation at this time. And so to try and get closer to understanding the proposal and its implication, I put together possibilities to consider based on the LMC and the general plan. And this is a non-exhaustive list, but I just wanted to highlight a few options. For example, the applicant should present 2 3-acre sites to propose the estate zone changes while the remaining acreage stays ROS. Something else we could condition this zone change to condition the plat to require a common drive or a building pad or a house size or a maximum landscaped area. We could consider energy savings options such as utilizing infrared heating abilities or prohibiting outdoor heaters, including pavement heaters. We could also establish a finding confirming that the approval of the zone change ordinance does not necessarily guarantee development. This is mainly related to the sensitive lands ordinance because the land up there is sensitive. And then also possibly the applicant could propose sustainability measures that support the community's goal of net zero carbon by 2030. And then finally, get a professional to identify and protect any wildlife corridors that may exist on the property. So with that, I will wrap it up and turn it over to the applicant, Ann Bransford. And Jeffrey Kuhn is also online. And thanks for your attention, Ann. I can turn it over to you. And this is...
Okay, thank you, McKenna, very much. And allowing us to present our what we call a conditional zone change. I'm going to take very little time, and that is true. What's the? Oh, that's the thing. We're going to have some fun with this. Do I see? Okay. Two very iconic pictures in this first slide. We all remember Silver King for its either the mining or its good great Mexican food. The woman on the left has quite a story. She happens to be our great aunt, Aunt Susie, also known as Utah's Silver Queen. So she arrived here in search of silver, but she ended up bearing 4 men and outlived them all. Is this the next one? The Bransford sisters. Well, I'm the youngest, and here we are. Isn't it cute? The person on the right is really, up in the right-hand corner, is really somebody that probably none of you met, but it's somebody we should all pay homage to. His name is Leland Swanner. We called him Uncle Lee. I'm the little cute little girl sitting on Mama's lap there, and we're on Uncle Lee's sleigh out in what we now all love and enjoy, the Swanner Preserve. They're the 3 sisters many years ago skiing a run that I guess was named after great Aunt Susie. And then to the left, we've got the clan of, I guess, the 5th generation. And then my older sister gave me when Park City Treasure Mountain opened, a ski lesson. So we've had fun in Park City for a long time. Oh, that. And I get teary-eyed with this shot. The woman on the left standing there holding court is our mother, AKA Mimi. She instilled this incredible work ethic in us and volunteer gene. To her left is her mother. The woman to her right is my sister sitting in the second row there. And her daughter, who is now 42 years old. Pop Jakes and fun wood cutting parties that we've had on our property, oh gosh, for decades. My parents had them before that. We take it to the center photo, and then you've got Al Fang and his brother, Fair. My sisters were up there when he was at Ecker Hill. To the right, Brimhall Lake. There we've got the Janet Q. Lawson Girl Scout Lodge. I think my sisters earned some merit badges there, and when they stayed at Lookout Cabin. My youngest daughter was married about 4 years ago at the town bridge. Okay, this says it all, who we are as a community. And the Bransford sisters, well, we stepped right in. Mary came here and jumped right in. I think her first board was the Egyptian. These are all the nonprofits that my sisters and I have either served as board members or contributed to monetarily or delivered food to. We love this community. We've been around. I guess collectively we've been around just recently for over 45 years. Allow me to introduce my sister, Mary Leader. She arrived here and just before the Olympics. And these are some of her latest pet charities. She's been involved in everything, has a difficult time saying no, and her passion right now is the Carolyn joined us a few years back, having lived mostly abroad. And again, she received the the volunteer, Jane, she's been, in addition to these charities, she's been involved on the board of the Pratt Institute, raised millions for Broadway. She delivers groceries to the Peace House, or did with her precious Mr. Flash. He's known around town. I'm the baby of the family. I arrived here with 3 young children in tow, raised them pretty much single-handedly, and get put back in the form of serving on the school board. Several boards around town. I see Terry or in the audience. We've had a few rounds together, and fun rounds of fellowship and whatnot. And yeah, I've enjoyed every minute of it. We needed to get a Y chromosome in the mix, so we rounded up one of the few people I know, but I do know a few geniuses, and John Needfeld, Colonel John Needfeld actually filled the bill. And he joined us as our board member, our 4th board member. He's a colonel in the Air Patrol, and his company was bought out by WordPerfect. So he kind of keeps a good even keel. Just a quick flash of an 1882 map of the area, some surveying. We had to really clean up the area, our mining claims. And this next slide, I'm going through this quickly because I know people are here for other things. But this is the chain of title. It speaks for itself. 6 generations. I say business relationships here on the mountain, but really, you know what it boils down to? It boils down to friendships. It boils down to getting along with our neighbors. We haven't always seen eye to eye, but we always work things out. Deer Valley, love them. Park City, love them. People at Redis, or, Empire Pass, we get along with it. Nobody can argue that Charlie Sturgis is a heck of a nice guy. I think he's in the next slide. Nothing sells thing like dogs and kids. Those kids on the bench, the one on the right is now 30 years old and has 3 kids, my grandkids. We have had so much fun on the property, and we've shared it with other people. We've had wood cutting parties. We want to keep it that way. We really do. People on the right, that's Charlie sitting down. I think he's got a whiskey, got a Navy SEAL up there. We camp out. And then you've got, maybe some of you know, Double D, Dennis Dale. He's in the background. He got in on the action. But we've crossed country, we've camped, picnicked, we've shared our property. And so we now want to kind of move it on to somebody else. So here we go. That's the next slide. Unbeknownst to us, but we said, okay, some mountain bikes, I think by the city, Heinrich or whatever, and Charlie, were kind of just developed up on the south side of our property. But we said, hey, go at it. We did ask Charlie, said perhaps tortoise heads and all that fun and crazy stuff. Just give us a rider insurance policy. But we haven't said no. We said, enjoy it. In the wintertime, kind of the same thing happened. We have a ski run that just sort of happened. We were living on the East Coast. Just kind of happened. Trees were taken down. It's like, oh, wow, that's not our property. We got together with Deer Valley, and that little cutout there is where our property is. We have a 6-acre easement with Deer Valley. And people just all understand, we didn't name the run. The run's called Trump. It just sort of happened. And, somebody said, you're going to maybe put another one up there, and are you going to call it Ivanka? I said, no, I'm not even in that discussion. But anyway, okay, so that's it, folks. Just want to thank everybody and say that we're grateful to be here. We're grateful for your consideration, and we're flexible. Thank you very much for your time. McKenna. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I do have a question.
Did you have a question for me?
Where are the cats?
Where the snow cats?
No, the cats for your pets. I see the dogs. Where are the cats?
Where do you want them to be?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so, okay, commissioners, if there are there any other questions for the applicant or for planner, Holly? If not, I'll open up, the public hearing on this matter. Anyone wishing to speak on the Bransford parcel application, please step forward. Raise your hand online.
Hello, this is Jeffrey Kuhn. We do have more presentation we'd like to show.
Oh,
We've
I apologize.
responded with a
Please.
deck to what we heard in our last meeting, and I hope to have an opportunity to share the screen for a moment and show you what we've done.
Absolutely. I didn't realize that you were with us and that you had a presentation, so please
Thank you.
proceed.
So I'm trying to share the screen now. I hope it's visible.
Yep.
Great. So this is the presentation that we put together based upon what we heard in our prior meeting with you. We prepared it for last week. It hasn't changed since then. We wanted to, and I want to go quickly through this. Most of it you already know, but we heard questions in the
Jeffrey?
last meeting.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
but you're sharing your just your home screen, like your desktop. There you go. There you go. Can you? Yeah.
Thank you so much. That will be more effective. We heard questions about where the roads would go. We heard questions about how it would be developed, if there's sufficient utility capacity, how to access the utilities. Does the fire department and police department have the capacity to provide emergency services? We expressed the need to verify that if approved, our estate zone wouldn't become an island in a sea of other rural open space properties. That we would clarify what other properties would be affected by an approval. Are there any other mine claims that could make the same zone change request based upon an approval of our request? Information on paved road access easements, which was already in the prior package. What other mine claims could make the same request, where the homes would go, and how much land would be bulldozed if it was approved. We were able to create a 3D slope map, and the 3D slope map is kind of like a traffic signal. If it's below 15%, it's green. If it's between 15 and 30%, it's yellow. If it's above 30%, it's red. This was the actual flat map that generated it. Pardon me. And in the bottom of this map, the computer actually calculated all of the sizes in each of the color ranges so that we could produce this spreadsheet, which tracks mathematically that 88% would be preserved the way that McKenna explained, or that if we said 2 pads of 3 acres each plus a 1 acre private drive for an 1,100-foot road, we would at max have 18% out, which would still be over 82%, not including the undisturbed majority of each 3 acre pad. This is a background image from the 1981 study that Jack Johnson Company did for the Bransford's mother. And these were the access points that were thought about at that point in time over a topo background. These are still the most likely locations for the roads. Where the homes would be, we've modeled a pair of 4,500, 5,000 foot footprints along this Trump ski run in some of the flatter areas of the property. So this shows the basic information. Based upon what we can see, we think these are the most likely spots and the most desirable spots. We're talking about a 3 acre pad put around each of those spots. Because I don't have the ability to work with the curved lines of the ski run with my loving hands at home, we think that the ski run edge of the easement would be one of the borders, and we're calling these chalked out borders that we'll come back to you with staked and surveyed meets and bounds showing exactly where the lots would be. At the moment, all the utilities are currently stubbed in on Red Cloud Trail, right across from the Ruby Hollow cul-de-sac, and everything is right there. That's where the Deer Valley and Park City United Mines are declarant, and our contractor from the Flagstaff annexation zone anticipated us. This image, incidentally, is from the as-built Red Cloud infrastructure maps.
Mr. Kuhn, it's Commissioner Suser.
Yes.
I'm going to cut you off in about 4 minutes. We do have another item to get to, and we are restricted to 2 hours tonight, so we have to finish up by 7:30. So if you could just wrap it up a little bit, that'd be great.
I will move quicker.
Okay.
The questions about emergency services were dealt with in detail in the 2007 annexation zone. We have all of the documents. We think those satisfy everything. These are the exhibits of that document that talk about it. They're also appended to the back of this. Closest fire stations in Silver Lake. We don't think there's other mining claims that can make the same request. Ours is, we believe, the only mining claim that has the same meets and bounds as our tax ID number. We were specifically included in the annexation agreement by name and by each of the girls' individual names. And very few mining claims besides ours own any surface rights. So those are findings that could separate us from other potential precedents. We don't think that we would be a open space zone. Questions about other mining claims. We propose the houses be no bigger than next door in Red Cloud. We propose saving all the bike trails. We have projected the bike trails onto the property, met with Heinrich. We have a good comfort level that we can coexist with the bike trails. We're making commitments to protect the vegetation. There's a lot of good cause. I'll spare you right now. This kind of goes along hand in hand with the conditions that McKenna was talking about. Quite a few things can be postponed until we come back in a plat, and anything that we're approved for can be conditioned on satisfying plat later. And of course, we're willing to accept it. This deck is in your packet, so you have more time to look at it later if you wish. We put a landing page together where all of the displays that we've talked to in full detail are connected. We did create a few more displays to help you get your mind around the property a little bit better. And this addresses very well where the property is relative to the vegetation and our surroundings. This is a 2020 image that came off of the Planning Commission's website. So I'm ready to stop sharing my screen and address any questions.
Great. Commissioners, any questions? If not, I'll open up the public hearing now for anyone in the public wishing to comment on the Bransford application. I'm going to need some guidance because I can't see the room.
No, we don't have anybody here.
Okay. And anyone online?
There are currently 2 hands raised.
Okay, I can't see those folks, so a little help would be great. Could you promote the first person with the hand raised and announce them?
Yes, I just sent a promotion to Allison Turbeville.
Okay. Miss Allison.
It's for the.
There,
Allison actually is for the next item. Is there anybody else?
there is a Mark Stemler.
Okay, we can promote him.
Mr. Stemler, are you here to speak about the Bransford parcel? I see he's been promoted. So you just have to unmute, Mr. Stemler.
This is Mark Harrington. Mr. Stemler is an appellant in the next item, so I don't know if he's.
Okay, then no public comment.
Okay, so with that, I'll close the public hearing on the Bransford parcels matter. And commissioners, if you have any questions or comments or a motion to continue this item to August 10th?
I just have
that we,
I just have one quick question. How far, where the current utilities are subbed in, how far is that from kind of the closest proposed site for one of the houses?
It's approximately 900 to 1,000 feet from our property line and probably another 700 feet approximately at max to the closest home.
Okay, thanks.
I move that we continue the Bransford parcels to August 10th, 2022.
I second.
Okay.
We have a motion by Commissioner Hall and a second by Commissioner Kenworthy. All in favor?
Can I stop? Can I say something really quick? We did wanted to bring it, like we are continuing it, but we did want to bring it to see with the new information that was brought from last time and just to get any additional direction from you guys, because next time we come, it will be a full action item and we just have it all. I mean, if there's any direction or on some of the stuff that staff proposed in the report or the additional items that the applicant has proposed.
Well, I'll weigh in on that, McKenna. I agree with the staff's recommendations requesting the further information for the commission to fully evaluate the application.
And I would agree with Commissioner Susser, especially in regards to the specific entities on page 7. There's so much information lacking.
Thanks.
Okay, with that, I apologize, but it is getting late, and we need to at least reserve 20 minutes for the next item on the agenda. So we do have a motion on the table by Commissioner Hall and a second by Commissioner Kenworthy. All in favor?
Aye.
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 And I vote aye as well. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very much.
If someone would call Chair Phillips back into the room, that would be helpful.
1 minute.
Okay. See, just to make sure we have Commissioner Suster with us and Commissioner Hall.
Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So we will move to our final item on the agenda, 4C. This is the PCMR lift upgrades appeal.
So I believe it's time for my disclosure. In order to err on the side of caution, I want to disclose that I was part of several discussions recently. One of the appellants, Mark Stemler, told me he intends to seek a TRO, regardless of tonight's action. His statement will not influence my decision. In a totally unrelated meeting I have with Deer Valley annually, Garrett, Hannah, Tyler, Stephen Graff from Deer Valley were at my campground, and their lift upgrade application came up. This was a big surprise to me. I was completely unaware of any coming application on behalf of Deer Valley lift upgrade. I believe the comments made in last week's chambers by Attorney Harrington brought us all some confusion. Thirdly, the information we shared was not related to Park City Mountain lift upgrade. For the record, Deer Valley doesn't rely on a CCC analysis, as is before us tonight. I plan to make the same disclosure if and when Deer Valley's lift upgrade comes before the Planning Commission. So for the record, I do not feel these ex parte nor any of my communications have been or were designed to influence my decisions, and they will not influence my decisions here tonight. Thank you.
Okay. I think that's it. No other disclosures, right? Okay. I kind of have a prepared summary just to kind of frame where we're at. So I'm going to just kind of go through that before we get started here. And so at the last meeting, we conducted a hearing on the appeal, which included presentations by the appellants, planning director, and the applicant, as well as a public hearing. I closed the public hearing. The commission ended the meeting in the middle of commission deliberations. After commission discussions regarding a possible continuance, the applicant indicated that they preferred to call the matter for a vote rather than delay. And then after that, Commissioner Hall and Commissioner Johnson indicated that they would be ready to vote if they had response for applicant in regards to the CCC discrepancy that was brought to our attention by the appellants. And so the commission moved to continue, and that's why we're here tonight, to allow the applicant an opportunity to respond and answer our questions. The applicant provided a written response that was distributed today. The applicant will be allowed to present their response, and then the appellants will be provided an opportunity to give a response. Both parties should limit their responses to the issues of the CCC discrepancy unless the commission has further questions of the parties. The planning director or city consultant EcoSign as well. The commission should resume deliberations, which is where we're at. We're just going to pick up where we left off. And ultimately get to a vote on this regardless of where we land. So that would be the objective. I don't anticipate this going late into the evening. So if we can all just kind of stay on point, and we'll go from there. So I'll turn it over to the applicants for the lift upgrade to give some clarification to the commissioner's questions at the end of the last meeting.
Thank you, Chair Phillips. Good evening, commissioners. Mike Gorrigan from Park City Mountain. Appreciate your time, as always, the opportunity to answer the 4 questions that were posed to us at the last hearing. all regarding comfortable carrying capacity. We've been thorough in prepping specifically for those questions that you had posed. Chris Cushing and Pete Williams from SE Group are here tonight to address those questions, and they stand by their calculations that have been provided previously. With that said, in the effort of timeliness, let me turn the podium or the comments over to both Chris and Pete from SE Group. Further, Chair, if I may, we'll move through this quickly, and I would like the opportunity to spend a minute or two after the appellants, if necessary, to answer further questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Do I need to hold this push button the entire time I'm speaking?
No, just the light should stay green. So
Okay.
as long as the light is on.
That would have been odd if I did. Thank you very much, Mike. I'm Chris Cushing. I've been with a principal at SE Group. I've been with the company since 1985. SE Group was established back in 1958 and has been planning ski resorts around the world for over 60 years. Before we get into the comfortable carrying capacity or CCC discussion and the commissioner's questions, I want to talk briefly about the mountain upgrade plan. In late 90s, 96, 97, we worked with with the prior operator of Park City Mountain to develop that mountain upgrade plan. That mountain upgrade plan, it's a planning document that recommends installing 7 new lifts and replacing or reconfiguring several existing lifts to improve access and circulation around the mountain. That was the primary purpose for that plan. As with all ski area master plans, mountain upgrade plans, this mountain upgrade plan provides an estimated CCC for the planned lifts and the resort as a whole. As I mentioned, we worked with the prior operator in developing lift-specific CCC before Park City Mountain became the operator in 2014. So moving on to the CCC issue, I'd like to briefly explain what it is, what it means, how it's used. So CCC is a planning parameter, and it's a tool that operators in North America and around the world use to balance resort capacities and operations to ensure a quality guest experience. Additionally, it's been accepted and is used regularly by regulatory agencies to administer ski areas within their jurisdictions. Examples are all regions of the U.S. Forest Service use CCC to administer permits. Many state governments, including New Hampshire, Vermont, New York, and others that have ski areas on either state forest or state lands. Many city planning commissions like yourselves have used this formula for administering permits. Up in Canada, Parks Canada uses the CCC calculation specifically for review of long-range plans at their ski areas in Banff and Jasper National Parks. And in British Columbia, the commercial alpine skiing policy specifically refers to CCC in their all-season resort guidelines, which SE Group helped to author. Historically, my father and others developed the basic formula of vertical supply divided by vertical demand back in the mid-1960s. Since then, we, Pete, myself, and others have made refinements to the inputs to that basic formula to represent changes in the industry and changes in technology. With a 50-plus year history, the CCC formula has assuredly passed the test of time and is a clear industry standard for calculating ski area capacity. And as far as the basic mechanics of the formula, vertical supply is the number of people the lift is transporting up the hill on a daily basis. Vertical demand is essentially the number of runs skiers can make on the lift each day. Vertical supply is simply a factor of the installed characteristics of the lift. Its vertical rise, its length, its speed, and so forth. Vertical demand is calculated using a process that we have developed over the past 50 years based on observations, our expertise, and professional judgment. Some of the factors we look at include lift wait times, type of skier ability level served, proportion of groomed runs, and many other factors that are unique to that resort or that lift. We use the same CCC formula for all resorts. It's the same basic formula. However, different inputs based on unique aspects of each resort as they evolve over time are used. For that reason, the CCC for a lift can change over time for a variety of reasons. If the lift is constructed differently than originally planned, it's longer, different alignment, different vertical. Advancements in GIS and remote imaging technology that are used for measuring the various parameters, terrain area, ability level, lengths, elevations, etc., can have an impact. Influence of other lift installations. For example, when McConkey's lift was installed to serve the surrounding terrain, lift lines decreased on Pioneer Lift, which increased the average number of laps that can be skied from that lift, increasing vertical demand and decreasing the CCC calculation for Pioneer, even though nothing had changed in terms of the terrain, the terrain or the lift capabilities. In summary, the advancements in ski equipment and ski operations technology have decreased the lap time, increased the number of runs per day, and vertical demand, which decreases CCC. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Pete, who can respond directly to your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. As anyone who knows me knows, I could easily talk about these issues all night long. So I will definitely try to keep these comments short. And I've been doing this job for 26 years. Capacity modeling is a big focus, big interest of mine. Can talk about it forever. But I've written down responses to the 4 specific questions. And so these responses represent my and SE Group's professional opinion. The first question you asked was, is vertical demand inversely related to CCC? Yes. If vertical demand, the denominator in the CCC equation, goes up, CCC will decrease. Conversely, if vertical demand goes down, CCC will go up. As we've talked about, SE Group uses a formula that we've developed over the years. It's a proprietary formula to calculate the average number of laps that can be skied from a lift. And there are many factors that affect that number. As Chris mentioned, some of those factors include how much terrain is available of each different ability level off of that lift, skier speeds, which incidentally are increasing with advancements in ski equipment, increases in hourly capacity and speeds of lifts, and the percentage of groomed runs that terrain service off that lift. So to say it a little bit differently, due to the improvements of lifts, more grooming, and better skier equipment technology, a guest can ski the same amount of vertical feet in less time. So, whereas maybe 25 years ago, it might have taken 6 or 7 hours to get your 20,000 vertical feet. Everybody knows guys that always say, I got to ski 20,000 a day, right? You can now pretty easily do that in about 4 hours. And that's just due to increases in all those things we've talked about there. Your second question was, is the 19,398 vertical demand on King Khan correct? Yes. In 1998, King Khan was only one of 2 detachable lifts, and its CCC was 1790, which included long average lift lines. When Payday, Bonanza, McConkey's Crescent, etc. were installed, which incidentally was a big point of doing the MDP back in 96, was to distribute people away from Prospector, as it was called at the time, and King Khan. That was very successful, and as a result, King Khan's lift times decreased. And again, very quick just very quickly here, it's important to note lift line times. You're not talking the same number of people, right? So if you said, okay, there used to be 300 people in line and now there's 200 people in line. Well, if the hourly capacity of that lift doubled, that's half the wait time in that line. So if people are saying, oh, it's the same, I'm looking at the same line, sure, but it's taking much less time to get through it. So your lap times are going to decrease. Demand increases, CCC decreases. King Kong was again upgraded in 2015, so that further increased the lift's vertical demand. That upgrade increased the rope speed. Again, means the lift runs faster. You're spending more time on the runs, doing faster lap times, etc. All those same factors. The third question you asked was, does CCC go down proportionately if one component of vertical demand goes up? Well, not necessarily, because there's two sides of the formula. So if you look at the formula, there's the demand, there's the supply side and the demand side. There are many factors that can impact both vertical demand and vertical supply. However, if you said, okay, one of those is staying the same and the other factor will change, CCC will go up or down as dictated by that equation, proportionally, yes. The fourth question you asked was, are the figures reported on Eagle Express and Silverlode correct? Yes. I calculated the CCC numbers that are presented in PCM's application, and we SE Group stand behind those calculations. Also should note that you guys hired EcoSign. They reviewed the numbers and concurred that everything is correct. The appellants disagree with our CCC calculations for Silverlode. 1998, Silverlode CCC was 1940. The CCC has subsequently decreased to 1650 because the lift's vertical demand has increased. Vertical demand has increased because of shorter lift line times, increase the average number of laps that can be skied off lift, the same thing we've been talking about. The proposed lift upgrades will slightly increase the lift CCC because upgrading from a 6-pack to an 8-pack will increase the hourly capacity of that lift. And that obviously is a component of the vertical supply, the numerator in the CCC equation. As for the questions on Eagle, that lift would continue to provide out-of-base access to a large degree, as the current existing one does. So we've assigned Eagle an up mountain access roll percentage of 60%, which results in lower vertical supply, therefore lower CCC. That, turn back to Mike real quick.
So no further comments right now, commissioners, and would just request that the opportunity to respond to questions after the appellants have concluded, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, that was about my calculations, 13 minutes. So nice job. Thank you. And with that, we'll turn to the appellants to give a response.
Okay, thank you. Deb's gonna pass some stuff out to you guys. That was 15 minutes. And if the applicant is going to get the benefit of response to our response, then I would like the same, especially if they're going to come to the microphone with more false statements. Okay, you can start your clock, Commissioner Phillips. We are back before you today on the binary matter of an appeal, specifically of the planning director's decision to consider and then issue an administrative conditional use permit for Vail's proposed lift upgrades. What we are specifically appealing is planning director's authority to do this. We maintain that not all criteria granting this authority were met, and that therefore the matter should go to you, the Planning Commission, for complete and exhaustive review. And this is entirely different from the basis on which the applicant is trying to trick you into denying our appeal. They are attempting to get you to evaluate the merits of the application. We remain focused solely on planning director's inability to meet the various criteria for ACUP review and issuance. We highlighted discrepancies between SE Groups and EcoSign's CCC calculations, discrepancies that drew the concern of Commissioners Hall and Johnson.
No one, not even SE Group, could address these discrepancies when pressed last week. Vail once again violated planning director's instructions not to communicate with commissioners and submitted a memo on CCCs to you all yesterday. In this memo that was only shared with us
Commissioner-
at 12:50
Commissioner
p.m. today.
Phillips, just want to, got to interject because for clarity, both the prior memos and this memo were submitted to staff. They were labeled and addressed to the Planning Commission. They were not distributed to the Planning Commission separately. So for the record, I just want to make sure you're clear on that point.
Okay, thank you. Well, that memo was shared with us at 12:50 p.m. today. You see in this memo the last paragraph that begins, quote, as discussed at last week's hearing. And you see here how Vail makes our point in writing. The experts are in disagreement. Our CCC modeling, and specifically our assertion that exaggerated numbers allow Vail to claim it is under total resort CCC despite being well over, had to do with the extrapolated King Kong and Silverlode vertical demands that we based on EcoSign's logic in regards to vertical demand and terrain as they apply to the proposed new Eagle. You'll recall Dave Felius's original memo stating that the vertical demand of 19,038 is suitable for black diamond runs. He suggested a more appropriate vertical demand in the 12 to 13,000 range and did this without even considering a site map or other factors such as tow rope speed. He based this solely on descriptions of mixed use terrain. Now you might be thinking, but Dave submitted his own new memo on June 13th and kind of sort of acquiesced. He writes, quote, after listening to the appellant's arguments regarding CCC calculations, I again reviewed the current and proposed CCC calculation tables as submitted by Vail Associates and SE Group, and again found that the methods of determining the CCC were performed according to industry standards. I also talked with Pete Williams of SE Group and was satisfied with his explanation as to the alleged discrepancy of CCCs between existing and proposed lifts in Exhibit H. You planning commissioners should not be satisfied with this explanation. The findings of EcoSign are material, particularly as they conflict with the applicant's numbers and as they mandate recalculation of other lifts. EcoSign has not assuredly backed off its assertion that vertical demand for the new Eagle is way off. And vertical demand isn't a, quote, industry standard. It is a very specific calculation that requires explanation and verification, well beyond the oversimplified and unquantified, quote, shorter lift lines and better equipment Vail leans on in its memo. For example, it must factor a mid-station, like is shown for the new Eagle, and which SE Group actually factored in its lift upgrade analysis for Loveland Pass. We included that table in the packet provided for you today. SE Group appears ready to ignore it. And that's the problem. It's these selective exclusions that may appear minor, but are adding up to massive overages, misunderstandings, and miscalculations. So if the vertical demand for the new Eagle remains off by a lot or a little, it means the CCCs so too are off for the new Eagle and King Kong that serves the same terrain. If Mr. Felius wants to reverse his assertions in which planning director roots her authority to grant an ACUP, then, and please write this down so that you can ask him, he's going to have to be able to explain in detail the industry standards he references and also be able to clearly articulate all on his own what it is about Pete Williams' explanation that is suddenly driving Mr. Felius to admit his previous findings were way off base. But here's the thing, Dave can't do that. No one at EcoSign can, and here's why. The mountain upgrade plan that literally hinges on CCCs was created largely by Snow Engineering. Snow Engineering ideated the proprietary CCC model for the purposes of planning ski resorts. Though all resorts and ski industry experts are vaguely familiar with the model, no one, as you witnessed last week, can fully explain it. But everyone has to rely on it, use it even, and involve and credit and defer to Snow Engineering when they do. But Snow Engineering doesn't really even exist anymore. Today they do business under a different name, and that name is SE Group. To understand the implications of this outside of ski area development, let me parallel a more general scenario. This would be the equivalent of a developer, say like PEG, back in the late 90s, driving a development agreement and rooting it in all sorts of metrics and considerations like height restrictions, setbacks, circulation routes, water usage, etc. And Park City Municipal would agree to bind all residential and commercial development to that agreement forever and ever. And then when it was time for PEG or any other developer between the late 90s and today to develop anything, they'd have to do it according to the metrics and limits PEG defined in its initial agreement. And then when it came time to measure to validate that PEG or other developers were following that agreement and all the code it set forth, PEG would be the only ones around with rulers, measuring tapes, surveying equipment, calculators, car counters, even eyeballs, just to bear witness to what was being developed. And PCMC and every other developer in the community would just have to trust that they were and are right. Obviously, this would never happen in the real world with general development. We don't just rely on experts and accept what we're told. We measure, we validate, we inspect, we prove. We bring developers before Planning Commission for thorough review. And when developers step outside the line, we stop work, we penalize, we bring things back within code. Shifting gears to another glaring issue that proves planning director was well outside her authority to approve an ACUP and that our appeal must be upheld. Commissioner Johnson, you asked specifically whether the replacement Eagle lift was in the MUP. It wasn't. It isn't. And while planning director was evasive last week, she was selective in what she has provided for the Planning Commission to review. Exhibit D, as provided in your previous packets, and again for you here today, is the map planning director has submitted to support her assertion that the new Eagle is an upgrade. It shows a potential Eagle replacement running alongside a future Chandala. Please note this diagram is from a draft document that is neither indexed nor referred to in the bound version of the MUP that we are beholden to. Unlike planning director, who has only opted to provide excerpts for your review, we have furnished copies of the final and bound version of the entire MUP for your review, which is critical to understanding the full implications of this ACUP. If you look at the actual diagram in the adopted MUP, which is Exhibit C before you today, you see that Eagle and Eaglet are supposed to remain fully functioning as is, and that an entirely new lift, a Chandala, is to be introduced to service what the MUP proposes as a required second beginner area on the meadow, along with beginner slopes and the largest lodge on the mountain with indoor accommodations for ski school and daycare. The proposed Eagle that planning director would have you believe is merely an upgrade does none of this. Removal of the Chandala from the MUP has many significant repercussions, and this alone requires Planning Commission review and rigorous study to determine that any future upgrades will support the right mix of amenities as initially planned for. Criteria 1 of the DA gives the developer direction over the type of lift it installs, but this doesn't mean they can just go changing alignments or replacing one lift with another. The significance of the Chandala in the MUP has all but been ignored in applicant's application as well as planning director's review and approval. Finally, just like the irrefutable evidence to support the fact that the Eagle replacement was neither part of the MUP nor mentioned once in all 69 pages of the bound version, also irrefutable is the language and evidence to support understanding of a peak ski day and its mandated application. Planning director shared page 35, which we all know says a peak ski day must be factored, but she maintains a peak ski day isn't defined. This is false. Page 15 of the MUP. Quote, historical skier visit performance records at PCSA indicate that the resort experiences peak days, which are approximately 10% greater than the CCC, end quote. Appendix A of MUP parking and capacity analysis, page 2, quote, Park City peak skier counts are generally in the range of 10% over CCC. Consequently, 110% of CCC has been used throughout this analysis as an approximate design guide for base facilities on peak days while maintaining 125% as an upper limit. Page 3, an on-mountain survey of skiers was conducted for the 1995 to 96 study. page 5. Measured observations in the 93-94 studies indicated a drop-off rate of 100 cars and 300 persons per hour peak. Drop-off rates have been observed to increase over this rate in the 96 parking lot evaluations due to skiers entering the lower lot to access the new ticket sales windows and the Eagle Chair access to the mountain. As discussed previously, the current CCC of the ski area is 9910. Peak conditions can and will exceed the CCC. The CCC was exceeded 4 times in the period displayed in chart 1. From operational experience, the peak skier counts are approximately 10% greater than design capacity, end quote. In conclusion, this is not about whether lifts are upgraded or not. It is about whether or not lifts are upgraded in accordance with the mountain upgrade plan and whether the planning director has the command, has the right information, and the authority to do that. We welcome rigorous evaluation and conditioning and hope to provide recommendations on COAs in future planning commission meetings on these matters, especially as we now know that skier counts are possible and that limiting skier counts is within the authority of Park City Municipal. Today, we remind that your one and only decision is whether or not planning director was within her authority to approve the ACUP. As we have proven, she and staff and applicant relied on wrong data and alignment schematics not indexed in the MUP. Therefore, criteria were not met and planning director was precluded from such authority. Our appeal must be upheld. Thank you.
Thank you. That was 13 minutes.
Commissioner Phillips, just wanted to point out the running around. I had a question from the audience what the running around was, and we were just trying to make sure that the Commissioner Hall and Commissioner Susser had copies of what was distributed in the meeting, as well as the applicant. So we provided copies to all of the above. And hopefully Laura and Sarah got the email from Deb regarding the handout. If you haven't, please let us know.
All right, well.
Yes, I received the email.
Okay, you did. And Commissioner Susser, did you receive it as well?
From Deb? Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay. So at this point, I'm wondering if I allow the applicant response and then the appellant, or and I'm asking the commissioners, or do we want to ask some questions first and then allow them a final statement maybe at the end? I'll look to the commissioners to help make that decision on what we as a body would like to do.
I would like to have the discussion now as my time is limited and I was planning on the agenda timeframe for this meeting.
Okay. Well, at the conclusion of the last meeting, Commissioner Hall and Commissioner Johnson and myself included, although I may or may not vote depending on if my vote is needed. Do you have any direct questions regarding the explanation provided by CCCs or about the CCCs to kind of flush that conversation out? And if you're not ready, I'd turn to the other commissioners as well.
I can start. So I think one of the main things that I was going off at the last meeting that maybe you guys can address for me was I was looking at table IV4 of which was the 98 comfortable carrying capacity upgrading table. And it showed Silverlode, we're just going to say Silverlode because I think that's where I got confused last time, was proposed to be a detached 6-pack with a vertical demand of 11,769 feet with a carrying capacity of 2,080. So based off of your letter that we received today, the technology that's available now can update these, but also I guess what I'm trying to say is it's a 50% increase in the vertical demand for what's being, there's a 50% increase in vertical demand between a difference, I should say, between a 6-pack at Silverlode and the proposed 8-pack. Does that make sense to you? I don't know if I said that right. Maybe I should have let somebody else go, but I think that was my main discrepancy that I was trying to get at the last meeting, which I kind of got out of, that was like the major discrepancy, right? Is that we're using this data and it provides the resort owner with a cap of 13,700 carrying capacity, yet we're saying that it's constantly evolving over time. I guess I just really wanted clarity on the difference. I mean, just to use this one in particular, since you somewhat addressed the other ones, but it's a large discrepancy, yet the carrying capacity is only really reduced by, a couple hundred or whatever it is. So, and the terrain itself, right? So just to kind of lay my mindset here is that in 1998, there was a quad at Prospector, and all of that terrain has not changed. The only time it really changed was in 1993 when they installed King Kong lift. So I guess that's where it makes sense when you add, your justification for Pioneer. That was one thing that I brought up last week. Pioneer so you add McConkey's, that's going to change it. So that makes sense to me. But that was my real, perhaps you can enlighten me on the discrepancy on Silverlode. And I think you referenced a different CCC, which was the existing in this agreement. So I just want to make sure I'm on the right page here.
Correct. Yeah. So I think what you're referring to was a projected upgrade for that lift in the 1996 master plan with certain specifications on that lift that never happened. So that number is not that's not a relevant number, right? Because that was never done. Does that make sense?
That was not
when there are lots of lifts in the upgrade plan from the 96 master plan that represented upgrades and realignments and whatever to those lifts that have never been done. You understand what I'm saying?
So it didn't. When did it turn to a 6-pack?
Well, but I'm saying it doesn't have the same parameters. That's what Chris was talking about when you said,
sure.
So we can you can model existing capacity, and then when you're modeling future capacity, you're modeling a future scenario that you're projecting at that time. Well, if that's not built, you're not gonna meet those parameters.
So what in the MEP should I be looking at then to compare, right? So I guess that's all right.
So there's an existing conditions capacity table in there. It's in the earlier chapter. And there's an upgrade one, and the upgrade one set that 13.7, and that represented conditions that for numerous lifts that haven't that were projected at the time to be set with certain parameters that weren't.
So it has the same. Okay, so I found it. So it has the same vertical demand that I referenced that was in the proposed. Yet the CCC is not 2080; it's 1940.
Okay. Right. And that represented that time period where there were really long lift lines at both Prospector and King Kong because those were the only detachable lifts on the mountain.
There's no long lift lines there.
Were you here in 96?
I was, yeah.
There were long lift lines then, right?
They're not as bad as they are now, but yeah, sure.
But anyway, the point is at that time, there was a lot of people skiing on those two lifts, and there are much fewer people skiing the rest of the mountain, right? So like I said, that was one of the main points of that master plan. Yeah, and do you remember the gondola, the 23-minute ride gondola that nobody would never ride more than once in their life if they,
I rode it all the time. I love that thing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There's all kinds of stories about what happened.
Because nobody else was riding it?
Well, yeah, steeps too. Come on.
But anyway, so that was replaced by, Payday and Bonanza, of course. And,
right.
The point of that was to create other pods around the mountain that represented, desirable skiing. And so, take a look at Bonanza, right? Nobody used to ski that type of terrain. And now that place, gets a ton of use. So go ahead.
I think, just to sort of summarize what Pete's talking about is, you can't look at, when you're looking at the CCC of a specific lift, you can't look at it as a discrete situation. It interacts with all, there's an interaction with all the other lifts and terrain at the resort. So if you make a change to this lift over here, it can and many times does influence the way another lift operates if it's more popular terrain or shorter lift line or faster ride. So you can't look at a lift as a discrete situation. It's part of the whole of the mountain. So that's kind of what Pete was getting at is as other things change and people circulate differently or the use patterns are different or, there's certain, changes in the way the terrain circulates, it's going to have an impact on lifts that are, surrounding that area.
So can I jump in for a second?
Oh.
I just want to know, so the vertical supply, the weighted vertical demand, have you exclusively changed that between lifts, or are you still readjusting it and using it for that, whatever that figure is, that blended figure of your terrain and everything? Is that blended figure you're using the same throughout?
No.
Okay, so you're adjusting the blended figure of the terrain on each and every lift.
Correct.
And was that done the same way in the past?
Probably for the past, 15 years we've been incorporating that. Basically, when this whole formula was originally developed back in the 60s, there were specific ranges. If it's a beginner terrain,
right,
they're going to want this much vertical demand. If it's intermediate, they want this much vertical demand. If they're expert, they want this much, or there's ranges. And so what we've done more recently over the past 10, 15 years, whatever it is instead of relying on industry standard ranges, looking at the specific circumstances that are unique to a resort and the lifts at that resort, the way people ski, the types of skiers, all kinds of things. There's, how fast they're going to go, and depending on if it's, a consistent fall line versus consistent fall line and then flat terrain. There's just so many different variables that influence how people are going to circulate on a lift, as well as, what's happening elsewhere at the resort, where people are going and what the primary flows are. And, we just found that those ranges, those industry standard ranges just didn't apply. And also because of, the changes, lifts are faster, ski equipment is better, people are doing things differently. And so we felt it was important to capture those parameters that really influence the capacity of the resort, of the lifting resort. To get back to your question, it's been probably 10 or 15 years that we've.
Okay, so you're changing, that number is being changed based upon your updated analysis of these things.
That's right.
And the beginner slopes used to have, let's call it 2,000 feet per day. And your advanced, super advanced, they had 30,000 feet per day.
Right.
And now you're changing that depending upon each lift uniquely with the blended rate of the mountain. Talk to me about that. I don't understand how we're supposed to have a blended rate and then we individually change the number for the vertical supply. Isn't that a number? Isn't the vertical supply number the total amount of feet per day on the entire mountain?
No. That for each lift, for each individual lift, there's a vertical supply,
right?
It's the hourly capacity of the lift.
And if you add those all together, you have a total.
Yes, you would have a total, but you don't. To get the total CCC for the resort, it's not a total of the vertical supply divided by a weighted average of the vertical demand. It's the CCC is calculated for each individual lift, and then that CC is totaled. So it's not, actually, I suppose maybe you could do it the way you're referring to, but you'd want to rate. I won't get into that, but you'd have to weight it based on the capacity of the lift, and on the capacity until you have the CCC.
Well,
at any rate, no, the technique is to, for each individual lift, figure the vertical supply, which is very definitive because the lift, it's got an hourly capacity, it's got a speed and so forth, or vertical and so forth. And then the vertical demand is, we apply all these parameters that are unique to that lift and how it functions within the overall resort. And we get the vertical supply, we get the vertical demand, that gives us our CCC for that lift. And then those CCCs are all added up to get the total for the resort.
So you're above the line, you're doing the vertical rise, the hourly capacity, the operating hours, and the loading efficiency.
Correct.
Yeah, I didn't see that in the city report. I didn't see the loading efficiency put into his equations. So that is your equation above the line, those 4 items. And then you're using individual vertical supply, as you refer to it, to define those.
There's another factor too.
Okay.
That is the utilization rate or access. The other factor is utilization rate or access reduction. So a perfect example of that is going to be Town Lift or Silver Star, right? So no one can sit here and say that those lifts are, that there's long lift lines at those lifts all day long, right? Even on a big day, you're not going to find.
Oh, you weren't there this year. You were definitely not there this year.
Not all day, not all day.
There were some pictures out there, so
I would seriously pursue on the all day.
I do want to agree.
But anyway, that factor is included as well.
Okay, so but clearly there were longer lines this year than any year you remember.
I don't think that's true at all. I remember really long lines in the 90s, but it's okay.
Could I jump in here? I have a specific question for EcoSigns, Chair Phillips, if they're available.
Yes.
Are they available?
Yes. Yeah, I am
okay,
here.
Great.
Steve here, yes.
Okay.
Sorry, Laura. Sorry, Commissioner Sousa. Before you just jump in, I was planning on sticking to the agenda timeframe, and I just wanted to say one thing before I have to sign off, and that's really just that to me the part that I'm struggling with the most is that the CCC is not a defined term, and so it just really seems that it's a fluid number that it changes, and essentially any applicant could create whatever CCC they would like. It just seems like a really bad standard. And so this whole process of learning a lot more about the CCC has really just made me more critical of the old development agreement reference on the CCC. With that all being said, I know this is going to go on for a lot longer, so I'm going to have to sign off.
Okay, I don't know how that's going to impact our evening, but okay.
So I concur with Commissioner Hall that the whole CCC analysis is tricky, but I'm willing to accept that this is the way it's used as a planning tool at the resorts. It's commonly used in the industry, and I'll accept that and try to work then with with the information that's been provided by the consultants and the applicant and the analysis that was done by staff. So I just have a couple of questions. My first question is for EcoSign, because in their memo, their EcoSign CCC number assumes that Vail will discontinue operating the Three Kings lift, even though Vail includes the continuation of the Three Kings operations in its analysis, correct?
What we had said is that we anticipate that if you have a detachable lift that services the same terrain right beside the fixed grip lift, that probably they will, not many people will use it and they'll choose to discontinue using it, yes. And I believe SE also assumed that, but to a lesser extent, that they said it would be used maybe half.
Yes, they assumed it would be used a lot less and put in a reduced CCC number for the Three Kings lift. And EcoSign said, well, looks like they'll discontinue it altogether, even though Vail hasn't proposed that. So
yes, and that was speculation on my part. As I said, if typically what we see is when there's a detachable lift right beside a fixed grip lift, but people don't use it much. Yeah.
Okay, got it. And then Vail and EcoSign differed in their analysis of the CCC for the new Eagle lift. And so where I come down on that is that I think it's probably appropriate, and I'd like to ask the planning department now if they agree that it would be appropriate for the commission to accept Vail and SE's CCC for the Three Kings lift, because they plan to continue to operate the Three Kings lift, and the CCC for the new Eagle lift that EcoSign proposed. And Vail got to this at the end of their response today, so that the CCC is very reasonably 13,130 rather than the proposed CCC by SE and EcoSign. Is that, I guess I can ask Gretchen that. Wouldn't it be reasonable for the commission to use that number as the overall CCC, the total CCC, the 13,130 that Vail gets to in their response memo? That makes sense to me. Eliminating the Three Kings CCC that EcoSign did doesn't make sense to me, and it doesn't make sense that Vail didn't increase the CCC for the new Eagle lift.
What we used for the numbers were the SE numbers, Laura. We did not ask EcoSign to do a full analysis of all the numbers that SE Group had done. What we had asked them was to review their methodology and one, to explain CCCs to us and explain the methodology, and to review their numbers so that we could feel comfortable with the information that was provided to us by the applicant.
So the planning department was comfortable with EcoSign completely eliminating the CCC for Three Kings.
I'm sorry, one more time, Laura.
I focused on these two parts because it seemed like EcoSign did and Vail did as well. It's like the new Eagle lift and the Three Kings lift were sort of the focus, and that's where that's the discrepancy that I focused on, and I think was clear in the materials. And I found it kind of unsupportable that we would reduce the Three Kings CCC to zero when Vail intends to continue operating it. So that's where I come out. I come out with the total CCC is 13,130, which is 260 more guests than what we've been presented with, and we have to make sure those additional guests are accommodated properly at the resort. So that's where I am on the application. That I think I see that's how I've now understood the discrepancy, and that's where I come out. And I think Vail anticipated this, and that's why they added that section at the end of their response today, because it makes sense. And that 13,000 is within the max CCC for the resort, but it is still an increase in CCC, and we have to make sure those additional guests are accommodated. That's where I am. That's my comments. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So at this point, we have Commissioner Hall is not going to be able to stay with us much longer. We did agendize this for 45 minutes. We are already over that time, so I want to move this along. If anybody would like to address Commissioner Suster's comments, and actually before that, what I'd like to do is ask Commissioner Hall if she has any more questions on the CCC, and then I'll give SE Group an opportunity to respond to Commissioner Hall's, concerns. And then at that point, I'd like to turn to the applicant to give you 5 minutes. I'll give the appellant 5 minutes, and then I'd like for the commission at that point to vote on something, whatever it is. So before we lose Commissioner Hall, and she just can't stay on much longer. She's was expecting us to be done.
I have no further questions.
Okay, so I'll let SE Group address that last question and then we'll follow through on that process. If you have any response, you did.
Well, I think, I mean, the staff report uses the numbers that we calculated. So I think, I mean, I guess
okay.
I don't understand what the.
And as presented in the staff report, you're comfortable and stand behind the numbers that you guys have presented?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right, Mr. Gore, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. The only issue on appeal is whether the director issued an administrative CUP with the 19 detailed condition of approval that allows the resort to upgrade 2 lifts. And as we've said time and time again, she did. We've engaged the world's foremost experts, 2 of them, to deal with CCC. The calculations that SE Group has been using around the world for in the neighborhood of 15 years, it's surprising that it is questioned as to whether CCC is an appropriate planning tool at this point. I think it's absolutely appropriate for us to lean on their expertise and their calculations. The industry standard is CCC. The appellant has provided no expert testimony, no expert data. And I'd like to just ask again that we consider what was asked of us through the process, through the application process, and that we've provided that information. We've answered all of the questions. And as you've alluded to, Chair, and I appreciate that, I certainly would ask that this be called to a vote tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, brief response.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, what is your last name?
Cushing.
Cushing. Okay, Mr. Cushing. So just a couple of things I want to address in my final comments. There's the obvious things, right? Like you just alluded to, Commissioner Johnson. Mr. Cushing would have been part back in 2015 when there were claims issued that upgrading Silver Lode would have resulted in a 15 to 25% reduction in lift lines. We have experienced the complete opposite. And I totally understand and appreciate, right, the complexity of these numbers, the many things that go into them and blended numbers and how we have to consider it all together. But your wait times might go down if you increase the capacity of your lift, if you increase the speed, but they're not going to go down if you start putting more people in those lift lines, right? So we keep coming back to the fact that the resort is over capacity. These numbers have gone up significantly, between 50 and 60%, these vertical demand numbers. So when we look at what determines the vertical demand, overwhelmingly things like terrain that haven't changed. Are we really supposed to believe that some of these other categories that are cited, like equipment, have suddenly made intermediate skiers on parabolic skis or fat skis or whatever move down the mountain at such an increased clip that that's driving a 50 to 60% increase in vertical demand? And like, again, we just don't know because nobody is revealing the data that drives these calculations. And there's no reason with this much on the line and the skier experience, what it is, that anybody should be left to guess and trust. The cards need to all be laid out. Everybody needs to see what we're dealing with. In terms of a holistic approach, absolutely, right? There's a max capacity. I don't doubt that Vail and its money and its experts have the capacity to go back to the drawing table to consider the overall cap and then do whatever they need to do underneath it to manipulate the individual CCCs, add in the lodges that were promised, add in bathrooms, bring back indoor ski school staging areas, whatever it takes, right? But everything has to be kept under that max, and we need assurances that it is, not just handshakes. There's been conflicting things said, like we want to rely on industry standards, but then it was just said that industry standards no longer apply. And
And then I will just close again. I totally appreciate Commissioner Susser's concerns about the CCCs, but that's not why we're here today. Mike Gore wrongly asserts that we are appealing the 19 conditions of approval. We take issue with them, certainly. We believe they lack teeth, but that's not what we are appealing. We are once again appealing. This is binary. Did Planning Director Milliken have the authority and the correct information in order to consider and approve that administrative CUP? Throw all the CCC numbers out right now, look at the discrepancies in the new Eagle, the Eagle proposed, and the Chandala. That Chandala has gone away. She has used a map that was not in the final bound version of the MUP. We provided it for you today. On that basis alone, you have to uphold this appeal. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioners, any further comments?
Well, I'll just I'll weigh in on that that ultimate issue that we're considering tonight regarding the ACUP and whether or not it was so that I found that the application was not consistent with the mountain upgrade plan because the lift upgrade locations were not within the upgrade alignments identified in the MUP. So the newly proposed lift upgrades that don't go to the meadow, and they remove 2 lifts and leave 3 kings rather than replacing 3 kings, all of those were inconsistent with the MUP, and criteria 1 of the DA lays out that that the application could only be processed as an ACUP if the criteria are met. And criteria 1 requires that the application is consistent with the MUP, and I did not find that it was consistent with the MUP. So therefore, I would grant the appeal.
Okay, can I ask Commissioner Hall, at the end of the last meeting, you had said that you had found that all of the conditions had been met with the exception of 1 that needed more explanation. How do you feel? Have you gotten your explanation?
Yes, I have received my explanation, and I stand by my former opinion in the last meeting in regards to having all the other criteria met, minus the 1 question that I had, which I believe was answered tonight.
Okay, and I also hold that same position. Commissioner Kenworthy.
I agree with Commissioner Susser that it was a new lift and it should have gone before the Planning Commission. I also have a question about what was it, the mid-level drop off. Pete, could you speak to the appellant's question about the calculations with mid stations? I'm not going to get into anything more than that, but they were indicating that the calculations for lifts with mid stations was there a discrepancy with the calculations when you used for the Loveland Master Plan completed by SE Group? Yes, please.
Lifts that have mid stations, are certainly a complex planning issue, right? And so there definitely are 2 ways of looking at it. You can either look at a separate CCC for the one section or the other one, right? And so in many cases, we're more apt to look at them separately if it's a mid-load rather than a mid-unload, because that typically has more of a change in an effect on the on the lift. So there's going to be lifts out there in the world Summit Snowmass come to mind, where you have a long section that's relatively flat, and then you have a mid load, and then you have a steep section where it's repeat skiable, right? So that upper section really sort of functions as a separate lift, right? In this case, that's not really the case, right? And so what's happening is, you're going to have some people getting off for sure at that mid unload, undoubtedly. And then you're going to have some other people that are going to continue on. And some of those people are going to ski down to Silver Lode or to King Kong. Some of those people are going to repeat ski. And we've captured all of that in the way that we've calculated the CCC.
Okay, so I'm also with Commissioner Hall on the earlier statement that it does seem like these things have moved. How they've moved around to be able to fit. And I understand the purpose of this is the optimum number of skiers as well as the stewardship. But with all those calculations moving, I do feel that we need more time. And to understand those with specific numbers that you've used in changing the vertical supply, in having a loading efficiency number that we can all understand. And it's also reflective in the EcoSign. So the EcoSign report doesn't reflect anything with regards to those numbers. And I think we could all get around the table and understand this with the specific inputs that you're using for these lifts. I mean, you're saying, oh, well, you got to, Commissioner Johnson, don't look at these. Those were calculated differently and those were proposed numbers and all this stuff moving around. I can do the math if you can give me the inputs and we could look at it. And how the formulas change is the first thing I'm hearing tonight. So that gives me some hesitancy. How that in the last 10, 15 years, whatever this was from what was presented to us. Thank you.
Okay, we don't need a response at this point. I think the position's basically been stated. Commissioner Johnson, your questions were answered, and I don't know to your satisfaction or not, but would you like to state your position at this point? And then after that, I think we just make a motion, whoever would like to do that.
I'm still mulling a few things over.
Okay.
I'm going to reserve my
okay.
stance.
Well, let's see. So Commissioner Hall is going to leave.
Yeah, let me just summarize my my position, which is that I believe that the criteria were met, even though I don't like the criteria. I think that it's a bad standard because it's a fluid and undefined term. But that still being said, I do think that the criteria were still met, and therefore I would move to deny the appeal. And I would urge the city and the applicant for future plans to have a different strategy.
I would add, I guess, as we have, we're having conversations about how the CCCs and all these different things. And as I had said in the last meeting, ultimately, I'm not going to become an expert at it, but I do trust the experts. I don't feel that they are manipulating numbers. I think that they're using numbers that they use everywhere else consistently. And as we've heard, it's changed over the last 15 years, 10, 15 years. And I'm sure it's changed since they began using more information, which I think is likely to give us a more accurate depiction of the CCCs. They have stated that they stand behind the fact that we are below the 1,300, 700. I believe all the other criteria was met in order for this to be an administrative use. And the argument's been great. I think the appellant has done a great job in their arguments, and I commend you on that. I think the applicant has also represented their position, but I would agree with staff. And that would be my concluding comments. So if anyone has, I mean, we don't really have time for any more questions and debating. I think we're all kind of in our positions. And we've heard all the information to make a decision. So with that, if we need to take a 5-minute break for Commissioner Johnson to mull things over, if you'd like that, then we can take a 5-minute break and come back and make a vote. Is there anything we need to consider before we do that? Mark?
No, no, it's up to you're at the deliberation stage still. So it's really just whether the commission makes a motion or not, and
okay,
go from there.
Okay, then I'm going to move that we deny the appeal.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Okay, I'm not hearing a second. So at that point, I guess I would look for an alternative motion. Tell you what, let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back and we'll revisit that. Give the commissioners time to prepare for a vote. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to turn to Commissioner Johnson because I can see, we see that you're mulling it, and I understand the stress that we are all under. Do you have any further questions that might help you come to a decision? Or if you feel like you can flip a coin, whatever you need to do.
I don't think it's down to flipping a coin. I think I'm just having a hard time going either way. I think I can make a decision, but I'm just struggling with the CCC still. I just think that it's like, they acknowledged in their, in the statements tonight that advanced technology has allowed for more accurate calculations, yet we're using this 13,700 from 1998. And it affects parking, it affects a multitude of other things. And it's just, this is what I'm struggling with, but I do see both sides. So let's just go.
Okay. So
I'll make a motion that we continue the item. And why I'm doing that is so that we can address some of these other issues that have all been talked about. Where I'm not sure we really got a chance to put our arms around the stewardship that's included in a CCC. So where I saw on the eco sign, I saw where in their report they state that they didn't verify the lift specifications and they didn't do a lot of things in there. I'd like to see all that stuff tightened up. No map verifying where the lift was. Then we see the appellant bring in a map specific and show the difference between it being designated as a new lift and a replacement lift and how those judgments were coming. Like I said earlier, I'd like for us to work as a community, and I'd like to see the stewardship of this brought forth. And that is what we're looking at. And I know, obviously we have to go down a checklist, and I've done that. And I do see this as a new lift. I don't see this as a replacement lift. I clearly see that here today. So what I'd like to do is continue it. And I believe, if I'm correct, City Attorney, we can then open up the conditions of approval and make some suggestions. Am I correct?
If a majority of the commission wants to make a determination of error in the existing conditions of approval or findings, the code gives you the basis to grant in part and deny in part, which we have interpreted the ability to modify a condition of approval. So yes, you could get into further conditions of approval.
So we first have to have a vote on the actual upholding of the appeal or denial of the appeal.
No, you have to first, a majority of you first should determine what the error or errors are to get to the basis of granting the appeal in part to modify the conditions of approval. And so, for example, Commissioner Sousa provided one in terms of swapping out the CCC number proposed by EcoSign for the one lift as an error. If three of you agreed with that, you could modify that if you thought that was an error. But I caution I think the inquiry into the broader issues of how things could or should be defined. I think my only point last meeting that you alluded to as confusion was that was perhaps better for a substantive amendment to that MPD, which if you're going to amend the criteria by which you're judging the current application. That is not done on the fly. That's you modify that when you have the opportunity to modify the actual standard, and that's not what the CUP standard is. CUP is permitted use if the conditions can be mitigated, and you have the consistency with the MUP. So I think your question regarding the MUP, if two of you so far have found that it's not consistent with the MUP, two of you say it's consistent with the MUP in terms of the alignment, the specific alignment. And so I think you need to resolve. That's a legitimate issue where you seem deadlocked. The other issues, I think you have to approach once you cross that bridge.
Can I just have a clarification there, Attorney Harrington? We can vote to grant or deny the appeal based on whether or not we believe it met the criteria for an ACUP approval, correct? We don't have to go into which conditions of approval we would like to amend, right?
No, but you have to identify. You have to identify the error that you believed occurred.
Okay.
It's not enough to raise questions that you think there might be an error. You have to identify an error. And
yes, as I said, I don't.
In order to sustain an appeal, the three of you need to affirmatively decide that, and that's what I think you're trying to do.
I think, and the difference of this and what we are normally handling is that this is an appeal, and was there an error in the previous decision? So with that, I would open it up, start fresh, open it up for a motion by any of the commissioners, and we may go through a couple different motions until we find the right one. We have one motion that has been put forth by Commissioner Hall. So I'll start with that, and then we'll move on from that motion. So we have a standing motion by Commissioner.
No. So you need to call for a new motion and a new second.
Then I'll call for a new motion.
Okay, Commissioner Hall, I move that we deny the appeal.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do I have a second? Okay, I'm not getting a second. So can I get an alternative motion?
I move that we uphold the appeal.
Doesn't he have to say,
conditions number 1 and number 6.
Can you restate that?
I move that we uphold the appeal based on items number 1 and 6.
Okay. Any further discussion? Commissioner Susser, did you have a comment to make? Okay, do I have a second?
I just want Commissioner Kenworthy, I would amend your motion to say that I grant the appeal based on the fact that it didn't meet the criteria 1 and criteria 6 in the development agreement.
That is what I was trying to say.
Okay, so we have a motion to grant the appeal. Is that a second from Commissioner Susser?
I second that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed?
Commissioner Hall.
And Commissioner Johnson, are you in favor or oppose?
I'm in favor.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Kenworthy, a second by Commissioner Hall.
A second by Commissioner Susser.
Commissioner Susser, I'm sorry. And then we had Commissioner Johnson in the affirmative and Commissioner Hall that was opposed. So motion passes.
Okay, now the majority should provide clarity for the basis of their decision so we can come back with findings as required by the code within 14 days to memorialize your decision.
Okay, I'll turn
And
to
it
the
needs to be a
commissioner.
little more clarity than what we've received so far.
Okay. I'll try to help there. I agree with granting the appeal because the ACUP did not meet the criteria in the criteria number one in the development agreement for being consistent as the application was not consistent with the mountain upgrade plan because the lift upgrade locations were not within the lift upgrade alignments identified in the MUP, and the newly proposed lift upgrades did not go to the meadow, and the new proposal removed 2 lifts and left 3 kings rather than replacing 3 kings as contemplated in the MUP. Furthermore, the CCC analysis was incorrect in that it included the CCC number should have been calculated to be 13,130 rather than the 2 proposed total CCC numbers provided by SEN EcoSign. And the planning director found that the parking was properly mitigated by the parking mitigation plan provided by proposed by the applicant, but based on a calculation of the CCC being 13,130, the parking was not adequately mitigated. I think that's all I got.
Okay, did you have anything to add to that, Commissioner Kenworthy?
Well, I'd ask how deep in the weeds am I now allowed to go? Am I allowed to talk about the findings?
Anything you want in the findings to
so
that
with
you can
the-
convince the other 2 to adopt that reflect the basis of your decision. So you can get as deep as you want to at that regard.
I get it. So I agree with everything Commissioner Sousa just laid out. Additionally, I found that the paid parking mitigation used comparables that weren't satisfactory. I find that Alta and what was the other one? Beaver Creek just aren't comparables to what we have here as a community, as well as access and controls on parking and mitigation. So I don't find that they are comparables. I didn't see our expert eco sign find, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, verified with a map on the exact locations of these lifts and these upgrades. And I see where, like I mentioned earlier, the lift specs weren't verified. In his report, he continually said, well, assuming that the spreadsheet I got was right. And I can't cross that line with an expert. When you pay somebody, an expert, to do everything, he's got to cross all the T's and dot all the I's. And I found a lot of weakness there. Lease on the high school parking lot is 8 days a month, I see. And we have a 7-day-a-week parking problem. So that was a big one for me. And 8 days a month, we're way over that right now as was used. And I know there were some historical debates in previous commission meetings, but let's look for December through March this year and how many days we actually use the high school. And we have to contract for that. We can't just say, hey, don't worry, the high school is going to let us do it or whatever. The contract here states 8 days a week or 8 days a month, excuse me. So we definitely have to address that. Would I like to see more with regards to cooperation with transit and Richardson Flat being used? Absolutely. This is, it's sitting there. And we've got to, if we're going to believe that people are going to get on the bus, we have to start it. And we have to, do a pilot program over there with Park City Mountain Resort's involvement. As well as the business community and the other resort here in town, Deer Valley. So I'd like to see all this stuff resolved. I think the cap is well defined, as the appellant put in on a peak day. And so I had trouble with this kind of, it's kind of ambiguous. Let's get together. Let's look at what the number is and let's define it. And if we're changing things from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it is, let's understand the path. And I'm completely open to the new technologies and everything, but nothing has been presented by the applicant that gives me the information to do the math. And as Mark will tell you, I like doing the math. So those are my thoughts. And just be specific, I was very confused by the loading efficiencies not being in the city expert report. And then the new one that Pete mentioned, which was accessibility factor input that you mentioned that wasn't on the previous old definitions and formula. Is that correct? I'm sorry? Uphill access factor that wasn't in previous, a decade-old formula. Is that the one you were mentioning? I would like to see the current formula with the inputs. And if we could have examples of that so that we could actually verify all of these now that we're doing, these individual inputs on these lifts. Thank you.
Did you
Chair
have
Phillips, I have one more detail that I could add to the mountain upgrade plan specified that 200 stalls at the base are used by employees, and all parking stalls at Sweetwater are used by employees. Therefore, the parking chart in the PMP narrative document on page 4 of the PMP narrative document, it reflects that a certain number of stalls are available. Let's see. I think it's 1,574 are available or required, but that number doesn't back out the number of stalls used at the base and Sweetwater for the employees. So I just wanted to add that I think that needs to be corrected. Thanks.
This is a really tough decision, the toughest one I've had yet. But I would thank you guys for explaining the CCCs. I think it actually did help. I don't like them in any way, but it justified my concern, I guess. I just really looked at one thing in the decision, and that was just I went back to figure 4.1, the image in the MUP, and looked at the ski lift alignment, and it didn't jibe with that agreement. So that's the reason for my for coming to that decision.
Okay. I think that that wraps it up. If you want to make a statement before we close our meeting.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I had some confusion. I brought this up at the last meeting, and is that for both lifts, or is Silver Lode? Did you ever consider bifurcating the project?
We did not discuss that.
It seems that the CCC issue centers around Eagle, and yeah, so I would just ask again, it was something that I brought up earlier, if it was possibility to have a conversation around that.
Commissioners that, I guess the commissioners especially that voted in favor of the denial or of the, not the denial, I apologize.
Do you want to ask Commissioner Hall first, maybe? See if she's gone.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Oh, yeah. Commissioner Hall is gone. So we've lost one commissioner. She was hanging in there, and I thank her for that. But we are just down to us and Commissioner Susser.
May I ask a question?
Well,
I can approach.
Yes, go
May
ahead.
I? Thank you. Well, you rendered a vote, and wouldn't there be opportunity for bifurcation if the applicant wants to resubmit and then separate them out? But either way, you voted, so, right?
Yeah, and
It's their
so-
choice now.
Yeah, but the commissioners can also weigh in, and they'll probably be in agreement with you.
Yeah, so Mark Harrington, Senior City Attorney, just for clarity, they've voted to deny the appeal. That vote is not final until they adopt their written decision when we come back. Sorry, thank you. It is late to approve the appeal, sustain the appeal. So the commission could clarify if a majority wanted to vote to reconsider a split. You did consider it at the last hearing, as I recall, and I think you gave three at the time gave direction not to do that. But our code 15.1.18.0 does allow you to reconsider the degree of that motion if a majority vote to do so before you adopt the final findings. Or you can give direction, as the appellant suggested, towards you'd be willing to consider that on at a future application as well. So that either choice remains subject to the direction of the commission. But right now, your mission is to implement the vote to uphold the appeal, grant the appeal, and staff will return with findings as the three commissioners directed at this point, unless you direct us otherwise.
I'm not in position to consider a bifurcation at this time. I'm exhausted and I haven't considered it, so I don't want to get into it right now.
Okay.
I will consider it in the future.
Okay. I think that is enough, but Commissioner Susser, would you agree?
When the applicant said that the issue is really with the Eagle lift, so can they move forward with Silver Lode? The CCCs with the Eagle lift, it's not so much an issue with respect to either lift. It's the total CCCs that have to be the increase in CCCs for the application has to be the impact of that increase has to be mitigated properly. So I don't really understand the idea of a bifurcation, to be honest. That's
okay.
I understand the idea of a bifurcation, but I don't think it's appropriate here. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. That's enough. I mean,
well, no, I was just going to say, yeah, okay, that's my go. Well, no, on the spot. I was just like, based off my comments, I actually wouldn't be opposed to doing a bifurcation on Silver Lode because they've given, based on my decision, I wouldn't be opposed to that. But
okay,
I see where everyone else is at. So,
all right, and Commissioner Hall is not with us, so with that, Let's see, there was something I was going to say. And I lost my thought.
Well, we'd entertain a motion we probably need to bring this back next week to be within the 14 days if you don't have another meeting within that time frame. So we will try to get this put together for you by Friday, and then so it will be added to the agenda just for as an administrative adoption by the commission.
Okay. And I, because I've been trying to do this at every meeting, I do pay attention to the online attendees. And just so everyone is aware, my figure is we had about 110 people from the public attending virtually. So some of those may have been staff members and stuff, but just for the record. All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right.